The man had only come to take an entrance exam, yet he beat the academy examiner so badly that the man nearly started doubting himself. Because the instant the match began, he had already moved behind his opponent, and then slashed out with one clean, decisive stroke. That scene directly made the female sword goddess on the high platform want to take him in as a disciple on the spot. But they had no idea that this young man before them was no ordinary examinee at all. In his previous life, he had been the strongest sword god standing at the very peak of swordsmanship. Only because he had underestimated the final boss, Liquidator, he was pierced through the heart by a single strike from the enemy. He thought his life had ended there. But the next moment, he appeared in a mysterious space, and even met a god of time who called himself Kronos. The other party told him that there was a power inside him even stronger than Liquidator, only it had not yet been awakened. So Kronos gave him one chance, to live a new life with his memories and a powerful soul. Everything he had would return to the starting point, and the fate of this world would be placed in his hands. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself lying on a patch of grass. The village not far away was his hometown, Runadu village. His whole body froze. Had he really returned to the past? Just then, a sharp pain came from his arm. He looked down at the wound. This was left by Baird and the others when they bullied him. He swore to himself, this time, he would never lose to that kind of trash again. Because 10 years later, Liquidator would descend upon this world. Liquidator was absurdly powerful. No one in the entire world could match him. But the god of time had said that his true power far surpassed everyone else's. It simply had not yet been triggered. He was just about to return to the village first and think carefully about a plan. When on the way he ran into Baird, who had bullied him for years. They had been looking for him for a long time and could not find him, never expecting to catch him in the forest. Baird threw a sword in Gray's direction. He forced Gray to fight him in a mock battle today, or else forget about leaving. Gray could not be bothered with him and only said his injuries had not healed yet, so they could fight after he recovered. Baird sneered, "Don't worry, this time we're using blunt swords, perfectly safe." As soon as he finished speaking, Baird charged forward in one quick step. He swiftly hacked out with a sword, but Gray easily dodged it. Gray had gone through countless wars. In his eyes, Baird's sword was laughably slow. That sight left everyone stunned. How did he suddenly become so fast? Gray quickly retreated, widening the distance while picking up the sword on the ground. Since he wanted to get beaten so badly, then Gray would give him a lesson. The moment Gray picked up the sword, Baird charged again. Gray raised his hand to counterattack and knocked Baird's sword flying in a single blow. Baird's face changed. That just now was only a coincidence. The next second, Gray showed a dangerous excitement. "Don't be scared. Hitting people with a blunt sword is very safe." After saying that, he slashed Baird with one strike. Even with a blunt sword, a bloody gash was still torn open on Baird's shoulder. Baird was so frightened that he dropped to his knees on the spot, clutching the continuously bleeding wound. All of this was within Gray's expectations, but it was not over yet. Taking advantage of Baird's stunned state, Gray directly smacked him across the mouth with the flat of the blade. That strike knocked several of Baird's teeth flying out. Baird trembled all over. "Why have you become this strong?" He immediately called for his companions to attack together. The group quickly settled on a strategy. He suddenly got stronger. "Let's all attack together," and ambushed him from behind. In the blink of an eye, Gray was completely surrounded by several people. Gray let out a low laugh. "You want to end up like Baird too?" They would not listen and pounced at him all at once. Gray had originally wanted to let them off, but they did not know how to cherish that mercy. 10 minutes later, all of them had been pinned to the ground by Gray, unable to move no matter how obediently they lay there. Gray used to tremble in fear of them, but now he won with ease. If Gray remembered correctly, they were people from the Saria swordsmanship dojo. And that was indeed true, except they believed themselves strong enough and had recently simply stopped going to the dojo. Gray was speechless when he heard that. "With only this little skill, you dare think you're strong enough? That dojo may not help my swordsmanship much, but there is one thing there that I must obtain." He had never been to the dojo, but he remembered that the place only accepted people through recommendation. Baird told Gray to ask someone else, because if his master found out he had lost, he would definitely be punished. Gray only answered him with a light swing of the sword. "Cut the crap. Do as I say now." The wind from the sword swept past, and a leaf split apart before Baird's eyes. Baird's face turned pale, and he ran at once. "I'll lead the way. The dojo is in this direction. I'll take you there right now." On the road, Baird could not help asking, what exactly did Gray want to do at the dojo? With his current strength, there was no need at all for him to go to that place. Gray answered, the dojo had one academy recommendation slot, and that was what he wanted. Someone beside them muttered softly, even if he got into the academy, with his strength there was no need. He was already strong enough. Hearing that, Gray's gaze darkened. If this counted as enough, then he would not want to go either. Unfortunately, it was far from enough. Even if the world's strongest lineup were gathered, they still could not block a single strike from Liquidator. Even though in his previous life he had used that mysterious power, once Liquidator became serious, he still could not hurt the enemy in the slightest. He did not know how strong he needed to become before he could even talk about defeating Liquidator. But he remembered that instant. He truly had briefly gained control of that dark power, and that was also why he had been able to ascend to the peak as the Sword God. In his previous life, he had staked everything on the swordsmanship taught by the Sword Saint. If in this life he polished that power the way he had polished his swordsmanship, then perhaps the ending would change. But that borrowed Sword God from his previous life was ultimately only temporary. His own foundation was still not strong enough. He vaguely understood that perhaps this was the reason the god of time, Kronos, had sent him back. Not long after, Gray arrived at the dojo. The master solemnly apologized for what her disciples had done. Those few had already been expelled from the dojo as well. She would not allow such people under her school. Gray got straight to the point and explained his purpose. I heard this place can issue academy recommendation letters. I want to ask for your help. After hearing him out, the dojo master slowly drew a sword. She was willing to write the letter, but before putting pen to paper, she had to confirm Gray's strength. She signaled for Gray to make the first move, attack when you are ready. Gray did not stand on ceremony. The moment her words fell, he pressed in close, and in just 3 seconds, the two had already exchanged more than a dozen moves. The dojo master's heart sank. Something's wrong. At Gray's age, his swordsmanship was strangely practical, as though it had been honed in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. So Baird had not lost unjustly. They were simply no match for Gray at all. Even stranger, Gray's style mostly looked self-taught, but every now and then there were traces of an academy system in it, as if someone had taught him. In the end, the dojo master made her judgment. Gray's swordsmanship was still very rough, but his talent was solid. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly, an unpolished diamond, just right for me. She felt the time was about right. If they kept fighting, she would only get more carried away, so it was time to wrap it up. But she did not know that Gray had already seen through her intentions. He was waiting for her counterattack. Gray suddenly gathered force and directly knocked the sword out of her hand, making the dojo master's pupils contract. No matter how many more strikes she made afterward, Gray steadily received every one of them. The more the dojo master fought, the more confused she became. Why was Gray not retreating, but instead able to keep up with her rhythm? She had originally only been probing him, but now she was being forced to become serious. Even more outrageous, she actually felt a trace of fear in her heart. At that moment, Gray assumed a sword-swinging stance, and that mysterious power faintly rose around him. Without realizing it, his power had been triggered. The instant the dojo master rushed toward Gray, Gray slashed out with one stroke, and in that moment, it was as if a black mark had been cut through the air. The dojo master did not take it head-on and immediately retreated instead. Just now, that was ominous. Gray had unconsciously used that power, and his body immediately became weak as though hollowed out. The dojo master seized the opening and prepared to end the duel with a single strike. Her ominous premonition had not been wrong. It was just that she had not received Gray's strike head-on and had not felt the true weight of that power. But when her strike came down, her expression instantly froze. Her wooden sword had somehow broken, and even more frighteningly, she had not noticed at all. It turned out that Gray's earlier strike had already cut through her wooden sword. If she had rushed in then, what might have been severed would have been her head. Gray was equally shaken inside. He had actually used that power from his previous life again. But the next second, his brain felt as if the power had been cut off, and he dropped straight to his knees before the dojo master. He finally understood. With his current body, he simply could not withstand that power at all. Gray struggled to his feet and said he was fine. He hesitated over whether to tell the dojo master about the power. After all, in his view, this woman was strong enough. But on second thought, he let it go. Even if he said it, she might not believe him, and he himself could not control it anyway. Gray suppressed his emotions and smiled. I got a little too fired up just now. But the dojo master stared seriously at the broken sword. From a common-sense standpoint, this was simply impossible. Her sword had been cut through by a blunt blade, and she was certain Gray had realized it too. Seeing her expression darken, Gray immediately played dumb. Do you think something is wrong? The woman slowly closed her eyes. Since the other party did not want to speak, she would not press further. She turned to Gray. You want an academy recommendation letter, right? The dojo master said that she indeed could write a recommendation letter and send Gray into the kingdom's most elite royal swordsmanship academy. But she would not recommend Gray there. The reason was simple. Gray was not suited for it. Gray's heart sank, and disappointment welled up in him. She was right. At his current level, he really was not enough. What he lacked was not courage, but power, especially in the fine details and control of swordsmanship. He was still far inferior. But in the next second, the dojo master changed her tone. Don't misunderstand. I believe the place you should go is the World United Academy. Gray's expression instantly froze. That was not the kingdom's top academy, but the world's top academy. Countless powerful figures had come out of there. Even more importantly, the Sword Saint had also come from there. Suppressing his shock, Gray asked her, with only this little strength I have right now, how could they possibly accept me? The dojo master nodded. You should understand this yourself too. Your body is far from meeting the standard of a qualified swordsman. At the Royal Academy, you might still get by with technique, but at the World United Academy, that kind of shortcut won't work. Even the dojo master could not understand how Gray had developed such skill with such a weak body. Gray sighed inwardly. The people at that academy were all monsters, and with his current physique, he could not even stand on the starting line. The dojo master told him not to lose heart. There were still 9 months before the exam. The time was tight, but it might not be too late. Gray's heart trembled. She wants to teach me? Sure enough, the dojo master told him to prepare for suffering, because next, she would begin a stretch of hellish training for Gray. Gray did not know how terrifying this hell would really be, but it was exactly what he wanted. For the next 9 months, please teach me, master. No matter the result, I will do everything I can to learn your sword. In the days that followed, Gray trained like mad every day according to his master's plan. Besides training, he also had to push his nutrition to the limit. His master prepared large amounts of meat for him. Those medicinal herbs so bitter they made people nauseous also had to be swallowed by force, all to temper his body into something tougher. But the most important thing was still swordsmanship. Sparring with his master took up most of his time. In the blink of an eye, 8 months passed, and Gray's physical condition had become far stronger. Even the dojo master felt that there was not much more she could teach Gray. Next, he should go to the World United Academy with confidence. Although there was still 1 month left, his master believed that Gray should not take the exam in an unfamiliar environment, and it would be best for him to go there early and get used to the place. And before his departure, she even prepared enough travel money for Gray. Gray accepted the money and swore that he would never let down all the effort his master had invested in him. I'm setting out now to register at the World United Academy. His master smiled faintly. I will pray for you. If you pass, send me a letter. More than 20 days later, Gray finally arrived at the World United Academy. This was also the first time he had ever come to such a luxurious place. Next, the academy would begin distributing exam entry passes. Countless examinees had gathered here, but in the end, only about 20 of them would likely pass. But some people also said that the number of successful candidates varied greatly every year. Sometimes 50 were admitted, sometimes only 1, and sometimes even several hundred. In short, it was completely inconsistent. Before long, a red-haired woman walked to the front of the crowd. Alright, let's get straight to the point. We will now distribute the exam entry passes. Please pick up the test paper in front of you. The woman raised her hand and snapped her fingers, and in the next second, a mass of golden light enveloped the entire venue. After that, a sheet of paper appeared out of thin air in everyone's hands. On Gray's paper were the words, Candidate number 513, Fencing Course. From the high platform, the woman's voice continued. Some of you will notice that this paper contains nothing except a number and a course. Don't be surprised, it is like this every year. The World United Academy does not discriminate against anyone because of age, gender, nationality, status, or any other reason. Here, names also have no meaning. Only those who pass the exam and earn the qualification to cross the bridge will be asked their names. If a qualified candidate wishes, even using a false name is allowed. Gray was startled inwardly. He had never said that he wanted to apply for the fencing course, so how did they know? The woman said she assigned the courses based on appearance. She even added, if anyone had been assigned the wrong course, raise your hand and she would personally kneel and apologize. But that claim was too absurd, and no one believed it at all. They had definitely investigated them before classes began. Some even suspected she had used mind-reading magic. In any case, it was impossible to assign courses based only on appearance. After waiting a while, no one raised a hand, so she began announcing the exam arrangements. After her words fell, a string of numbers appeared on Gray's exam sheet. The swordsmanship course would take place at 11 a.m. on the first day. Gray cursed inwardly. Of all times, it had to be him on the first day. He had originally wanted to rest and let his arm recover. The woman said slowly, this is a one-time practical exam. Anyone who is late will be directly disqualified. Please be sure to arrive on time. We do not accept requests from anyone to adjust the examination time. Gray unconsciously touched his arm. It would have been nice if he had a few more days to heal. It turned out that on the road, he had encountered an ogre and an ogre general, and at the brink of life and death, he had once again used that mysterious power. With just one sword strike, he killed the ogre general. Afterward, He had to rest for a long time, which was why he only arrived on the last day of the academy assessments. His arm had been injured in that battle, and badly at that. Now he could only fight while wounded. Soon, a staff member informed Gray to prepare to enter the arena for the exam. Gray took a deep breath. He should not be pessimistic now. At least his left arm could still be used, and his right arm could still barely move. Dealing with the exam might not be impossible. So at the very instant the fight began, he had to seize the examiner's opening and then end the battle as quickly as possible. At the same time, ahead of Gray, one examinee was currently dueling with an examiner. That examiner instantly bent down into a crouch, then violently swung his sword and sent the burly man flying with a single blow. The failed examinee picked up his weapon and silently left the field. The corner of Gray's mouth twitched slightly. He had a bad feeling. With his current injuries, it was simply impossible for him to defeat that examiner in a short time. At that moment, the examiner turned his head and shouted to Gray, "You're next. Get up here. Stop dawdling." Gray slowly walked onto the stage, feeling uncertain. His right hand was too badly injured. The examiner stood there with his hands behind his back. "You make the first move. It doesn't matter if you come at me with everything you've got." Gray quietly tightened his grip on the sword hilt. Even if the man had not said so, he would still go all out. This was his only chance. The next moment, Gray's figure shot forward. He remembered what his master had once taught him. She had said that swinging a sword was not just about the arm, but about using the whole body to generate force, then sending that power out through the arm. Now, he was ready to put everything his master had taught him into practice. Even if his right arm could not produce strength, as long as he could transfer that power into other muscles, he still had a chance. Gray closed in on the examiner in the blink of an eye and raised his hand to slash with his sword. He followed his master's method, but still could not reach his usual condition. The injury to his right arm was affecting him too much. If simply being able to swing a sword without arm strength were enough to make someone stronger, then no one would ever have trained their body so hard in the first place. At the same time, the examiner caught Gray's opening and prepared to counterattack, but Gray was not about to let things go so smoothly for him. At that moment, Gray suddenly sensed that something was off. Why was the examiner's sword so slow? If the examiner were weak, then he could not possibly be standing here. Conversely, it could only mean that Gray himself had become faster. With a sharp whoosh, the examiner slashed down with his sword, but Gray blocked it with ease. Gray quickly judged the gap between the examiner and his master. The man was fierce in strength, but far inferior to his master in speed and technique. As long as he used the swordsmanship his master had taught him, he might be able to make up for the lack in his arm strength. Gray clashed head-on with the examiner for dozens of seconds, the sound of blades colliding exploding again and again. Gradually, Gray discovered that he was actually suppressing the other man in speed. His judgment had been right. The examiner could not keep up with him. At that moment, the examiner began to panic, and even his expression twisted. Seeing that look on the other man's face, Gray's heart sank and rejoiced at the same time. The examiner was not as terrifying as he had imagined, and he had a chance to win. Just as his master had once said, she was certain that Gray would definitely pass. With a clang, the two swords slammed into each other once again. But this time Gray had the upper hand. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the examiner's sword flying. An opening for a counterattack had appeared. Gray was now overflowing with confidence. Even if his right hand could not move, he was sure he could still take the man down. However, the examiner was not slow either. In an instant, he drew his sword back and unleashed more than a dozen counterattacks in succession. Unfortunately, Gray saw every single strike with perfect clarity and dodged each one. The examiner's sword path had already been completely seen through by him. The next second, Gray's left hand suddenly gathered strength. He used no tricks and thrust directly at the examiner's torso, but even this strike was still blocked by the other man. That made Gray realize one fact. The gap between them was still very real, and it was hard for him to break through the examiner's stance head-on. Winning this match with only one hand would not be so simple. The situation fell into a brief stalemate, but the examiner's movements began to grow rough and his rhythm began to break. It was risky, but this might be exactly the chance Gray had been waiting for. Then Gray deliberately exposed an opening in front of the examiner, and just as expected, the man took the bait. At this moment, Gray was tense to the extreme. He had to receive this blow head-on, and any mistake could end everything on the spot. The examiner did not hesitate at all and brought his sword down in a slash, thinking that once this strike landed, the match would be over. But Gray gave a low laugh. "Finally caught your opening." This wide, sweeping slash from the opponent was exactly the best moment for him to turn the tables. Then Gray bent down and pressed all of his strength into his feet. In the next instant, he burst forward, and his whole body vanished from where he stood. The next second, Gray instantly circled behind the examiner. This was the easiest moment to succeed. No matter how great the gap in strength, once he got behind him, it was over. The examiner's pupils suddenly shrank, shock written plainly in his eyes. He had never imagined Gray could be this fast. Gray gave him no time at all to react. Let this exam end. But just as Gray was about to thrust out that strike, someone in the venue suddenly shouted, "Stop!" Gray immediately halted his movement, the tip of his sword stopping just short of the examiner's back. Gray looked up at the high platform in confusion. Did this mean he won? But he had not truly brought the examiner down yet. Someone on the platform announced that the exam time was up, so the result of this match would be judged a draw. He had been so focused on fighting with everything he had that he had completely forgotten the practical exam only lasted 3 minutes. Gray felt so frustrated that he turned cold. Apparently, he was going to fail his master's expectations. His unwillingness swelled in his chest to the limit. The sword in his hand tightened, loosened, then tightened again. Then Gray turned and left the arena. He had already done everything he could. If not for his injured arm, he could have ended the fight in an instant. If he could not even defeat an examiner, then the road ahead would only get harder. At that moment, Gray slowly turned around again. His arm should be healed by next year, so he had to take the exam one more time. Very soon, a week passed. Inside the academy, 6 people sat around a large round table in a meeting. An old man who seemed to hold the authority to speak opened his mouth. What do you all think of this batch of candidates? Now that the exams are over, shouldn't we come to a conclusion? 2 instructors first complained that they were nearly exhausted, and one felt that this method of everyone observing together was far too inefficient, and that next year the work had to be divided up. But another immediately cut in. We can't let a genius slip away just because we want to take it easier. The old man slowly raised his arm, anger in his tone. I'm asking about the student's performance, not institutional issues. He spread his 5 fingers. All the footage of the previous batch of examinees was instantly projected into the room. They would judge from the footage who had performed outstandingly, then combine overall qualities and strength to decide whether to admit them. And what was being played at this moment was the swordsmanship course. Aside from the few who defeated the examiners, candidates number 517 and 753 were the most eye-catching. One mentor said, even if we add the others in, they still won't keep up with the pace. We might as well stop here. The room fell silent, and the old man still stared at the footage without speaking. After a moment, he finally said, then the successful candidates for the swordsmanship course will be confirmed like this. Any additions? At that moment, someone said, didn't you notice candidate number 513? The old man's gaze paused. Number 513, what is special about him? The one who spoke was Professor Ariel. Answer me. What do you all think of 513? As a result, every instructor's gaze turned toward the footage of candidate 513. One instructor gave a disdainful smile. This kid looks very ordinary, and he's even left-handed. He had watched that match too, and Gray had indeed seemed like he was about to win, but if Gray had to rely on setting traps just to defeat an examiner, then he would struggle greatly after entering the academy. Gray's technique was good, but his strength was insufficient, so some also felt that he had been suppressed the entire time. After watching the battle process, they came to a direct conclusion. This child was not suited for this academy. The crowd withdrew the footage and shook their heads one after another, saying he was unsuitable. Ariel wanted to say something. Her mouth opened slightly, then forcibly closed again. But inwardly she was blooming with delight. Not a single one of so many people watching had understood it. If they were all this blind, then collective observation was truly a waste of time. This treasure would be hers. The second day arrived very quickly, and everyone gathered in the center of the square. Gray's candidate number was 513. If the paper in his hand burned, it meant he had been admitted. Soon, the broadcast sounded. The list of successful candidates for the swordsmanship course is about to be announced. A total of 6 candidates have passed. Gray's heart tightened. It was finally time for the verdict. Not long after the announcement began, 2 people's papers burst into flame first, candidate numbers 5 and 217. Right after them came candidate numbers 432 and 615, followed by candidate numbers 753 and 925. The above is the complete list. These 6 candidates had been admitted to the swordsmanship course. Gray's paper did not burn. This meant he had been rejected. Selected candidates, please complete your registration procedures before the end of today. Those who had been admitted laughed out loud, forming a sharp contrast with Gray's silence. Gray's heart sank. It seemed he really had let his master down. What should he do next? Go to the Royal Academy? Just as everyone's emotions were sinking, the next sentence from the broadcast directly interrupted all of them. Next, we will announce the special admission of the Eye of God. In the next instant, Gray's paper lit up with blue light. Candidate number 513 has been admitted. His face was instantly filled with disbelief. Not only Gray, but everyone froze. This year, there was actually an Eye of God special admission. Gray's shock would not settle for a long time. In other words, he had really gotten in? Someone let out a mocking laugh. Eye of God special admission? Haven't seen that in a long time. Gray had no idea what this was. It was his first time hearing the phrase Eye of God special admission. But the looks people around him gave him were full of contempt. Isn't that just pulling strings? So the World United Academy has fallen too. Gray froze for a moment. So in their eyes, this so-called Eye of God special admission was just backdoor entry. Gray instinctively thought of his master. There was no way he had connections behind him. Could it be that his master's network was so vast that it was beyond his imagination, and that was how she got him in? At that moment, an old man interrupted the ridicule. You two, stop talking about the Eye of God special admission like that. The Eye of God special admission is an honored category that has produced countless heroes over the past 100 years. Children like you do not understand its weight at all. The two laughed loudly. Of course those old fogies defend it. Their glory is all in the past anyway. It was not that they did not understand the Eye of God special admission. In recent years, those who had entered through it included Amy White, Bella Albright, Brain Miller, and Jacob Bloomfield. They had all been Eye of God special admits. But all of them had later failed completely. Even current candidates knew about that, which was why the Eye of God special admission had become a joke and a synonym for backdoor entry. Amy White, that was someone Gray had seen in his previous life, a person who had almost possessed the bearing of a sword god. Bella Albright was even a mage at the world's strongest level. Those three had also been the main force in the campaign against Liquidator. He had never expected that they too had been special admits. At that thought, Gray could not help swallowing. In other words, from today onward, my name will stand alongside theirs? The broadcast sounded again. The entrance ceremony would begin in 30 minutes. Students who had changed into their uniforms were to gather in the square before the main building. At this moment, Gray had already changed into his uniform like the other students. But after waiting for a long time, no one came to guide them, and they even began to wonder whether they were standing in the wrong place. Soon, a mentor came hurrying over, apologizing repeatedly. He said there had been a mistake in the arrangements, and the venue was still being prepared, so he had arrived late. Then the mentor told all the students to step back a little so that he could place the stairs here. Everyone followed his words and retreated 10 meters, revealing a golden magic circle beneath their feet. All of them were stunned. What exactly was this teacher trying to do? They watched as he slowly placed his hand on the ground. In an instant, golden magic power spread wildly along the ground. At the same time, another golden magic circle lit up inside the square. A staircase of gold rose straight up from the ground and connected directly to the hall inside. Everyone was shaken. What level of power is this? The density of the magic is absurd. Is this what a magic instructor at the World United Academy is like? In the blink of an eye, golden stairways also appeared on both sides of the building. The students could only keep gasping in amazement. The magic teacher gave a low chuckle. Go up the stairs and find whatever seat you like. Everyone was still marveling at the scale of that large teleportation array. Gray did not bother choosing a seat and simply sat in an empty one. He guessed the academy wanted to hold the ceremony somewhere with a view of the school buildings. Using teleportation magic like this was extravagance to an absurd degree. But no matter what, he had finally entered the World United Academy. And after seeing the strength of the faculty over the past 2 days, Gray became even more certain. This academy was frighteningly powerful. At that moment, someone in the front row asked in confusion, weren't there too many seats? If they were only admitting 30 students, there was no need for so many. The person beside him gave a light laugh. You don't even know that? The one being asked was not embarrassed. Other than practicing swordsmanship, he cared about almost nothing and did not pay much attention to news. A girl snapped her fingers. Then let me tell you. The World United Academy lived up to its name, gathering the top students from all over the world. So they were not the only ones attending the ceremony. The whole world was being admitted simultaneously. She raised her hand and pointed at the sky. Look, haven't those people already arrived? In the next second, the sword-practicing students' pupils widened. The sky was densely packed with airships, along with some magical beast mounts. The student was so shocked that he stood up on the spot. This was way too outrageous. Gray also saw a small craft beneath one of the airships. He was equally shocked. That was the Stratos airship, which he had boarded in his previous life. At that time, he had still been a member of the Liquidation Suppression Squad. It was said to be one of the largest airships in the world, and they had actually brought it out just for an entrance ceremony. But that also suited the style of the World United Academy perfectly. It should be this flamboyant. After the airships landed, large numbers of students from all over the world entered the hall one after another. At that moment, a large hand pressed down on the podium. Looks like everyone is here. Then the entrance ceremony will now begin. The speech that followed lasted a full half hour. Gray listened until his eyelids grew heavy. Even at the World United Academy, the ceremony was not much different from an ordinary school's. At that moment, a student beside him stood up. Next would be speeches from the top student of each department, and the first was Leonhardt, the top student of the swordsmanship department. When Leonhardt walked onto the stage, the whole venue stirred. He's the one who instantly defeated the examiner in the entrance test? There are even rumors saying his swordsmanship can rival any professor's. This person was Leonhardt Opius, a genuine swordsmanship genius. Gray became interested as well and looked at him carefully. This guy had a strong presence, but strangely enough, in his previous life, he did not seem to have ever heard of this man accomplishing anything notable. Leonhardt first saluted the instructors, then asked one question. Could he speak freely? The instructors nodded in permission. Once he got permission, his very first sentence made the entire crowd explode. I have a complaint to make to the academy. Before that, let me first salute all the students who were admitted through proper means. It is my honor to enter this academy alongside all of you. Let us work together so that after graduation, we may become people who can contribute to the world. The reaction below the stage was lukewarm. That part was too formulaic and lacked any spark. Everyone cared more about what exactly he wanted to complain about. There was no cheering, but Leonhardt did not care. I look forward to the day when we can move forward toward higher goals, standing shoulder to shoulder as students of the World United Academy. Then his tone shifted, and his gaze pointed straight at Ariel in the back. But unfortunately, there is one person among us who is not worthy of standing here. Am I right, Professor Ariel, the eye of God sitting over there? Ariel had not expected the spearhead to be aimed at her. This child really did not know the height of the heavens. But she still replied with a smile. The students here all passed strict examinations. Even if someone is not as strong as you, that does not mean you should casually deny them. Ariel's tone carried restrained anger. Why are you asking me? Do you think my eye of God is unfair? That was exactly the mind Leonhardt had been waiting for. I am not talking about those who were admitted properly. I am talking about the student Professor Ariel slipped in through the back door, the one under your eye of God's special admission slot. Ariel did not get angry, and instead smiled. This brat really does dare to bite. Is it arrogance, or confidence? Leonhardt raised his hand and pointed, his voice suppressing fury. That special admit, stand up, return your uniform immediately and leave the academy. You are not worthy of standing here. But no one in the venue stood up. Other than the 30 people on their side, the several hundred new students had never even seen Gray, and all of them wanted to see who this special admit was. Gray, of course, was not stupid enough to stand up in public, but where exactly was Leonhardt's hostility coming from? Fortunately, Leonhardt did not know what Gray looked like. It had truly passed by a razor-thin margin. As long as he did not reveal himself, he would not be dragged into this. Ariel gave a light laugh. This year's freshmen are certainly lively. Leonhardt suppressed his anger. I mean every word I said. The academy should stop letting people in through the back door. In the next second, Ariel's figure appeared directly behind Leonhardt, her voice as light as a blade. You think you are stronger than the child I chose? The whole venue instantly fell into dead silence. Leonhardt was the top student of swordsmanship, yet Ariel was saying he was inferior to that special admit. Even Leonhardt himself was stunned. Professor, that joke goes too far. How could I possibly be inferior to that special admit? The proud Leonhardt felt humiliated in public. He stared directly into Ariel's eyes. Of course I'm stronger than him. Am I wrong? Ariel did not get angry and instead seemed pleased. Then how about we make a bet? Leonhardt became even more puzzled. A bet on what? Why not just have him come up here and duel me directly? If I lose, I'll withdraw from the academy voluntarily. But he still asked what the wager was. Ariel's expression also turned cold. The wager is, my position, and that child's right to enroll. With that single sentence, both Gray and Leonhardt froze. Gray's heart tightened. This Professor Ariel really dared to bet big. But Gray also felt she was being too impulsive. His arm was injured, so there was no way he could beat Leonhardt. Had Ariel not noticed? Leonhardt asked, you want me to fight that special admit? But Ariel said she would not do something so crude. If he fought with his full strength, you might die. As an educator, I will not use a student's life as a wager. The veins at Leonhardt's temple bulged. Ariel's words were the equivalent of stepping on him in public. He gritted his teeth. Professor, are you provoking me? If you are, then I accept, even if I might die. But Ariel was completely serious. We'll use monsters as the wager. It's safer. And Ariel also knew that Leonhardt's greatest specialty was monster subjugation. Leonhardt's mouth twitched. You really are well informed. Then how exactly are we betting? Ariel explained it simply. They only needed to kill the monster target she designated. The competition would be divided into multiple rounds, and the target monster in each round would be stronger than the last. Whoever failed first to kill their assigned target would lose. If Gray lost, Ariel would resign from her professor's post, and all special admission students would be expelled as well. Gray let out a long sigh. What a hassle. I just wanted to practice swordsmanship quietly. If Leonhardt lost, then the conditions Ariel had proposed would be carried out. Ariel walked up to Leonhardt with an oppressive presence. Just tell me, do you dare or not? Although Leonhardt was confident, he had to first confirm what the monster targets would be. Leonhardt's strength was that he was not blindly confident. He believed he could win, but he did not want to fall into some inexplicable trap. Ariel nodded, as if seriously considering it. For the first round target, how about an ogre general? If you think that is too easy, I can raise the difficulty even further. The students below the stage instantly erupted. An ogre general was simply not something they could deal with. Yet at this very moment, Gray became even more puzzled. She had specifically chosen an ogre general. Was there really a trap here? Just as Leonhardt said? Leonhardt slammed his fist onto the table. Professor Ariel, I respect you, but this is ridiculous. Leonhardt shouted angrily. An ogre general is not a monster that one person can kill alone. Ariel said. Of course I'm not asking him to kill it right now. I'm giving you a full year. That's reasonable enough, isn't it? Leonhardt still felt it was absurd. If someone could train for only 1 year and then defeat a disaster-class monster alone, this world would never have had to suffer in the first place. Pick a more realistic target. No one can do that. Hearing that, Gray's mouth opened slightly. Then the corners of his lips slowly rose. He finally understood Ariel's meaning. On the other side, still unaware that he had already stepped into the game, Leonhardt continued. You deliberately chose a monster no one can defeat, just so this bet can end with no winner? I refuse. Ariel merely took a few steps forward, her voice calm to the point of cruelty. Then let's add one more rule. If it's a draw, you win. Leonhardt froze. In other words, as long as that boy could not kill an ogre general, Ariel would automatically be dismissed, and all special admits would be expelled. Ariel looked at Leonhardt with interest. Is that condition enough? Leonhardt only felt that Ariel had gone mad, and the result of the bet seemed practically pre-written. Ariel laughed and turned to leave. I assume you have no other objections. Then, it's settled. Leonhardt still was not at ease. Let's be clear first, it can't be a weakened ogre general or anything like that, right? Ariel answered crisply. Of course. Then she casually traced a few lines in the air. Her ring gathered a mass of purple magic power. A contract was taking shape. A feather pen rapidly wrote out the contract terms in midair. Soon the contract was finished and dropped before Leonhardt. All the details had been written into the magical contract, and once Leonhardt confirmed everything was correct, he could sign it. Leonhardt carefully checked the terms and indeed could find no loopholes. Then he picked up the pen and wrote down his name. The bet was established. After signing, Leonhardt felt certain of victory, but he still asked Ariel, do you really think that kid can win? Ariel replied lightly, I don't know. It depends on whether he is willing to cultivate desperately. After doing all this, Professor Ariel slowly sat back down in her seat. The other instructors all felt she had gone mad, and some suspected Ariel was only using the bet as a way to step down gracefully and retire with an excuse. Sitting in his seat, Gray let out a long breath and only felt that this whole group was unbelievably childish. But when Ariel changed the time limit to a full year, Gray sensed something was off. Could it be that she was counting the time he had defeated one before entering the academy? At that moment, Ariel's gaze happened to meet Gray's. Gray's heart gave a violent jolt. From the look in her eyes, he was almost certain that his guess was right, and that the outcome of this wager had been fixed from the very beginning. Ariel made a keep quiet gesture at Gray, her eyes carrying amusement. This woman was truly devious. Very soon, Gray had his first class, magic. At that moment, the magic teacher stood at the podium and slowly began to speak. Some of you may be surprised that classes begin directly on the first day of school, but as students of this academy, remember this, there is not a single day that can be wasted. Then he began with the most basic part, how to use magic. There is an invisible energy inside our bodies called ether. By controlling the magical circuits in your body, you can cast magic. At this moment, Gray was sitting in the back row of the classroom. He had originally been worried that he would not be able to keep up, but for now he was managing. He had already heard the same explanation in the training camp. Gray lowered his gaze slightly. Right now, he had another problem. Of all things, he had been assigned to the same class as that self-important guy. Gray smiled bitterly inwardly. He had no time to get dragged into someone else's nonsense. He only hoped the other side would not discover that he was the eye of God's special admit. But Gray's expression was still caught by the professor. The student in the far right back row, you look very bored? It turned out that this magic teacher had been staring at Gray all along. Class has not even gone on for 1 minute, and you're already spacing out. You've got some nerve. Gray had not expected to be called out even while sitting in the back row, so he immediately said in a low voice, sorry. The next second, the teacher snapped his book shut. Since you're so confident, why don't you demonstrate for the whole class right now? The teacher was convinced that Gray at least knew how to use basic magic. But before the teacher could finish, Gray interrupted him. With all due respect, we're in the swordsmanship course. I thought it would be fine even if we couldn't use magic. The teacher let out a cold laugh. Even if you only use a sword on the battlefield, you still have to understand the basics so that you can coordinate with mages. At the very least, you must learn basic magic and grasp the feeling of casting it. Gray's heart sank. Even this explanation was exactly the same as in the training camp. Then would the spell they were about to make them memorize next be the same too? The next moment, Gray directly spoke before him. What you're going to teach is the ether bullet. The magic teacher's expression stalled. You know it? Then can you use ether bullets? Thank goodness. That hellish training camp wasn't endured for nothing after all. The teacher's eyes shifted, as if he had found an excuse. Leonhardt, you can also use ether bullets, right? Leonhardt slowly stood up. Yes, teacher, I've trained in ether bullets as well. However, Professor, my pre-enrollment training wasn't limited to swordsmanship, magic as well. If you have me fight him in actual practice, wouldn't that be too risky? The professor was unconcerned. It's fine. No matter how great the gap between you two, you'll only use ether bullets. He won't die. And I won't remind you to hold back either. Because that gray-haired boy behind you, that is this year's Eye of God student. Go ahead and attack freely. The whole class instantly turned around, all eyes falling on Gray, curious, scrutinizing, restless. A chill ran down Gray's spine, as though he had been shoved into a dead end. With this, he had effectively been pushed onto the target. This old bastard, he actually exposed me in public. The teacher stared darkly at Gray, as if saying, let me see just how capable you really are, if you dare to zone out in my class. Leonhardt slowly straightened up. In that case, I'll properly teach him the rules. He turned his head to look at Gray, fury suppressed in his eyes. I'll make him understand what kind of place this academy really is. Gray truly could not understand why Leonhardt was so hostile toward him. You genius. I'll be my special admit. Can't we just stay out of each other's way? Gray's expression grew stiff with awkwardness. How long was this guy going to keep pestering him? A moment later, Gray and Leonhardt walked up to the podium together. The teacher said that once he gave the signal, the two of them were to fire ether bullets at each other. Gray honestly had no confidence. He had only studied magic for a few days in the training camp. Even if the teacher said no one would die, getting away completely unharmed was almost impossible. The moment the teacher said, begin, Leonhardt immediately condensed an ether bullet in his palm, his tone full of scorn. I'll let you see clearly the gap between us. Gray had no choice but to do the same, opening his hand and casting the ether bullet he had learned. Leonhardt's ether bullet shot out, but it was pitifully small. On Gray's side, however, what formed directly was an ether bullet as huge as a cannon shell. Compared to Leonhardt's, the difference was at least 300-fold. At that moment, both Gray and Leonhardt froze, and the same thought rose in both their minds. Why was the other person's ether bullet completely different from their own? But Gray's ether bullet had already left his hand, and it could no longer be recalled. Leonhardt's face instantly turned deathly pale. If that thing hit him, he would definitely die. At that moment, the teacher suddenly raised his hand, and a golden spell pattern appeared on his arm. The golden light instantly turned into a barrier, forcibly blocking the ether bullet, and only then did Leonhardt get his life back. The teacher's heart was in chaos. That had come within a hair of killing someone. But how could Gray produce an ether bullet of this scale? But before he could recover from the shock, cracks actually appeared on the barrier. The next second, the barrier shattered completely, releasing a terrifying shockwave that sent both people flying. The powerful aftermath swept across the entire classroom, and all the students were blown so hard they could not even open their eyes. Leonhardt flew backward the whole way, his entire body numbed by the impact. The teacher rushed over to support him. Are you alright? Only when he got closer did he realize that Leonhardt was trembling all over. Leonhardt struggled to stand and said he was mostly fine, but if not for that shield, he would already be dead. After confirming that Leonhardt was not in serious danger, the teacher's gaze locked tightly onto Gray. If not for the barrier reducing the impact, that strike really would have taken Leonhardt's life. What kind of monster was this child? The teacher decided that he absolutely had to speak with Gray. There were far too many questions he needed answered. Because even among the professors, no one could produce an ether bullet of this level. This was like discovering a new continent. Gray also stared blankly at his own hand. Why was Leonhardt's ether bullet so weak? Completely unlike his own? What Leonhardt had just used was definitely not the spell in Gray's memory. Could it be that the ether bullet Gray had learned in the suppression unit was different from what the academy taught? After all, that was magic instruction from 10 years later. But Gray still pretended to be uncertain and asked, Professor, did I use the wrong incantation? The teacher sighed. What you used was definitely ether, so it can't be wrong. But the quality of your ether bullet is different. What you used just now was absolutely not an ordinary ether bullet. By the teacher's understanding, it was more like a kind of super compressed ether bullet. The whole class was stunned. They had never heard of such a thing. Then the teacher also tried to reproduce Gray's magic from just now. But the scale of his was far smaller. Even professors found this power hard to control. Yet Gray had not only successfully cast it, he had also fixed it into a spell. No one in the entire academy could replicate what he had just done in that instant. Whispers began spreading below the stage. It's my first time seeing such a powerful ether bullet. Was this what the Eye of God's special admission was for? But then why didn't they just let him enter the magic department directly? That doesn't make sense either. Listening to the students' discussion, Gray instead fell into thought. The incantations taught in the suppression squad's training camp were almost all in this style. To be honest, even among that group, Gray was considered to have relatively weak magical talent. So Gray did not quite believe the professor's judgment. Professor, are you joking? As long as someone trains long enough, anyone should be able to do something similar, right? The professor burst out laughing on the spot. Gray frowned. Did I say something wrong? The professor laughed even harder. You really dare to say that? You're a genius. Making you study the sword is practically a waste. That statement hit Gray like a blow, and he froze. Was it really that exaggerated? The professor took one step and came right up to Gray. Why don't you transfer to the magic department and become my personal disciple? I'll personally guarantee it. Your magic will be taught by me. I dare say your talent for magic far surpasses your talent for swordsmanship. Gray refused immediately. No, I've always been told I'm not good at magic. The professor did not care in the slightest. Those people had no eye for talent. You've already mastered ether compression, and at such a young age you even created a spell for supercompressed ether. By the Academy's standards, you're an irreplaceable genius, and I can take responsibility for that statement. As for whoever said you had no talent, that person is an idiot. Gray, are you really not going to consider transferring? This string of words from the professor left even the audience below stunned. Being praised like this by such a strict professor was absurd. He raised his hand and pointed at Gray. If you don't study magic, it's a loss to the world. I can even say, it's a crime against magic. Gray gave a light laugh. Professor, it's not as exaggerated as you say. At that moment, Gray suddenly thought of a key phrase. What the professor had just said was ether compression technique. It sounded familiar. Gray's thoughts were pulled back into memory. Someone had once told him that they did not know about OD. That is, vital force. Because of that, it was extremely difficult to cast decent magic. So they had to continuously compress the ether inside their bodies, then try to gather and use only the portions that happened to mix with OD by chance. Back when the teacher who instructed them said this, his face had been full of certainty. Thinking back on it now, it was simply ironic. Gray spoke up and asked the professor, have you ever heard of OD? The professor looked completely blank. OD? What's that? From the professor's reaction, Gray completely confirmed it. This era still knew nothing about OD. If that was really the case, then what Gray had learned in the suppression unit was knowledge from the future. If he casually spoke of it now, it would definitely cause major trouble. He had to be extremely careful about whom he told. The professor eagerly pressed on, will you transfer to the magic course? Gray could only apologize and refuse. I love swordsmanship more. Thank you for the invitation, but I can only decline. The professor sighed helplessly. If you've made up your mind, then so be it. But he had no intention of giving up either. If Gray ever changed his mind, he could come find him anytime, at any hour. Gray scratched his head, a little embarrassed, and thanked him again. Right after that, the professor told Gray to return to his seat. If he zoned out in class in the future, he would not pursue it. If he found class boring, he could even leave at any time, and the professor would not mind. Because in the professor's eyes, this kind of basic class had already become meaningless for Gray. The students below began discussing even more loudly. He's too amazing. Professor Carlos actually values him that much. Today has really been eye-opening. As he watched Gray return to his seat, Leonhardt took 2 steps forward. His heartbeat was so fast it felt hot. A red rose suddenly bloomed in his heart. Leonhardt, proud to the core, had actually begun to admire Gray. Gray only felt a chill. No way, this guy wasn't about to latch onto him now too, was he? After class, Gray received a message from Professor Ariel. Come to my office after school. Gray was a little surprised. She had summoned him without any warning. Gray's heart sank. This could not be Professor Carlos's doing. Could it? Was he trying to persuade Ariel to transfer him to the magic department? Soon, Gray arrived at the door of Ariel's office, only hoping it was not really what he thought. Gray knocked on the door and found that it was not even locked. After waiting a moment and still getting no response, Gray had no choice but to push the door open himself. Please forgive my intrusion. But in the very next second, a sword flew straight at Gray. The instant Gray saw the flash of the blade, his body almost instinctively drew his own sword. With a flick of his arm, he knocked away the attacker's sword on the spot, the movement clean and precise. The girl was clearly startled, as if she had not expected Gray to react in such a short time. What she did not know was that this was not a deliberate action at all. It was simply Gray's body responding automatically. Why? I was attacked the moment I walked in? Gray's pupils shrank sharply. This girl in front of him. Why did she look strangely familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before? The girl slowly turned around, blue-haired and golden-eyed, with features delicate to an excessive degree. Ariel, sitting not far away, laughed. Your reflexes really are good. It seems I wasn't mistaken. Bringing you into the academy was the right choice. Two other instructors were also standing nearby, and they could not believe Gray had reacted so quickly. Bella, did you hold back just now? Your master told you to show mercy, didn't she? Your movement was perfect, but how could your sword have been knocked away that easily? That's not normal. Hearing the name Bella, Gray's heart shook. So it really was Bella Albright. In his previous life, she had become the magic witch, and she was also the one who had taught Gray magic. Ariel could not be bothered arguing with them. Are you too serious? You can actually say something like that? If you can't even tell whether she held back, then you might as well resign your professor posts. One of them laughed loudly. Just joking, don't take it seriously. As he spoke, he handed the gold coin in his hand to Ariel. Watching them gamble right in front of him, Gray slowly sheathed his sword, feeling only disgust. Gray asked, were you using me as a bet? Ariel did not hide it at all. Yes, we bet on whether you could block Bella's sneak attack. Thanks to you, I won quite a few gold coins. With a flick of her thumb, she tossed a gold coin over. This is your share. Gray's dissatisfaction instantly vanished. This one gold coin was enough for him to live on for a year. One instructor stared at Gray's arm and said, just as Ariel judged. In that brief exchange just now, it was as if he deliberately avoided using his dominant hand, almost like he was protecting an arm that couldn't exert force. Another instructor continued, his right hand must be injured, and seriously. It doesn't look like a simple injury to the surface muscles, but more like deep trauma. An ordinary wound couldn't leave that kind of condition. Most likely, it was caused by a severe impact, or by bearing an excessive load of force. If it isn't treated, it may leave permanent complications. Gray was inwardly shocked. As expected of instructors at the World United Academy, they could analyze it so accurately at a glance. The two of them laughed. If we couldn't even see that, we wouldn't deserve to be professors. Looks like Ariel had already noticed it during the exam. Ariel waved her hand impatiently. Since you've seen it clearly, can you two leave now? He's my student, and I'm not giving up on him. Stop pretending to know everything here. Before leaving, the two instructors said one last thing. We admit he has potential, at least for now. We hope you can teach him well. But they also reminded Gray, if that injury can't fully heal, then it means you still haven't met the standard. You'll have a hard time at this academy in the future. Remember that well. Those words instantly pushed Gray's sense of crisis to the limit. He had to heal his arm as quickly as possible. After the two left, only the three of them remained in the room. Then Gray heard Ariel say, those annoying people are finally gone. So next, let's talk about magic, and about the girl beside me. Today, Ariel had heard that Gray had used supercompressed ether in Professor Carlos's class. Carlos had personally come to report the matter. He had even requested to transfer Gray to the magic department, but Ariel had refused. Ariel slowly set down her coffee. In her eyes, Gray had almost nowhere to hide. She could tell that Gray was more suited to wielding a sword than becoming a mage. The moment Gray met her gaze, his whole body jolted. Her pupils, why had they changed? Ariel spoke, you don't seem skilled at magic compression at all. In fact, it looks as if you've never practiced it. Gray guiltily took a sip of tea. She could tell just by one look, so it was best not to lie in front of her. Gray admitted it directly. He really had never specifically practiced compression. Ariel seemed to have expected that all along. She said no one could lie in front of her, but what she wanted to know even more was what method Gray had actually used. She promised she would not tell anyone, and was even willing to pay him for it. And the reason she was so insistently asking about compression magic was because of the girl beside her. I want you to be her teacher. Because compression magic is tied to her fate. Gray frowned. You called me here because of Bella? Ariel nodded in admission. Bella was a genius in magical theory, but in practical application she was still far from the very top. No matter what, Bella simply could not get the hang of ether compression, and that was also why she could not create supercompressed ether. Gray had heard in his previous life that Bella Albright had been one step away, and now he knew this was where she had been stuck. Ariel relayed Carlos's observation. When Gray used supercompressed ether, it had not looked as though he went through any process of compressing ether. If there really was a method to produce supercompressed ether without actually compressing it, then Bella would not have to be sent to Professor Bradley. Gray slowly set down his coffee and repeatedly chewed over that name, Professor Bradley. In the next second, Gray's expression changed on the spot. The one you mean, is Professor Varian Bradley? Ariel nodded. I know you've heard of him. Of course Gray had heard of him. That man was infamous. Countless human experiments, piles of dead and injured. He had caused magical disasters and killed thousands upon thousands. He was one of the worst magical criminals in history, and at this point in time, he had not even been caught yet. Ariel's tone turned cold with pressure. If Bella could not create super-compressed ether before the end of the year, she would be sent there for surgery. Gray instantly understood what that meant. Being sent there was the same as being sent to die. That place held nothing but inhuman experiments. That's right, in name it was to enhance magical ability, but in reality it was human experimentation. Bella's life had at this moment been placed into Gray's hands. This matter had not yet been made public, but the rumors had long existed. Many young girls had died in his experiments. Some died, and some were completely ruined. There were only two paths before Bella. If she could not do it, then she would either be expelled or be subjected to the experiment. Ariel gritted her teeth so hard she trembled. I would rather have you expelled than let you fall into that man's hands. Gray did not agree immediately, but silently weighed the matter. What he possessed was knowledge that did not exist in this era. Once he spoke of it, history itself might be rewritten. Bella's hands were trembling. She wanted to beg Gray to save her, yet she did not dare force him. Gray saw her trembling. Bella was one of the future's core combat powers. She absolutely could not be broken here. Liquidator was too powerful. One more strong fighter meant one more chance to survive. Gray had personally experienced that kind of despair before. He did not want to go through it a second time. If the future could be changed under his guidance, then the overall combat strength of the subjugation force would be raised, and perhaps it would not be shattered by Liquidator in a single blow. Thinking of this, Gray laughed softly. If that's the case, then let's try it. Maybe Bella's fate really can be rewritten. That road called the hell of the future could only become better if changed. In the next moment, as if making up his mind, he firmly set his coffee cup down onto the table. He looked at Bella and showed a reassuring smile. Don't be afraid. I'll teach you supercompressed ether. With your talent, you'll learn it quickly. 3 hours later, at the arena, Gray brought over a blackboard and filled it with basic theory. All of it about supercompressed ether. This is everything I know. As we agreed before, do not tell anyone. This is what I taught Bella. Bella and Professor Ariel told him not to worry. We signed a magic contract. Whoever breaks it will die. Gray waved his hand and looked at Bella. After hearing all this, what do you think? If you have questions, ask them directly. Don't keep them bottled up. Professor Ariel only felt a headache coming on. She understood magic too, but she was better at swordsmanship. OD alone had already shocked her, and what Gray revealed afterward was even more outrageous. She could not process it all at once. At that moment, Bella slowly stepped forward. What you explained is indeed complicated, but the logic is very clear. If I had to describe it, it feels like listening to a magic lesson from 100 years in the future. Bella praised him with a very serious expression. With your explanation alone, the history of magic could be advanced by 100 years. You are a genuine magical genius. Gray felt a little embarrassed and thought to himself, it really is knowledge from the future, just 10 years later, and you were the one who taught it to me in the first place. It's just that those 10 years changed so fast it felt like crossing 100. Ariel could not understand the details, so she turned to Bella and asked, there are some points I can't judge. Tell me, is what he said true or false? Bella nodded. It's very likely true, and it doesn't conflict with existing theory. At the same time, she also believed that the fastest way to verify it was to test it on the spot, which was why they had chosen this place. If everything Gray said was true, then the spell in Bella's hands should work. And if Bella's current spell were used to reason backward into Gray's theory, the result would be unimaginably huge. In the next moment, Bella raised her hand and cast a spell. This was the first time she had used magic with her full power. Gray was stunned on the spot. This was actually Bella's full power? If he remembered correctly, Bella at full power could even destroy a city. How strong had she been 10 years earlier? The next second, a huge magic array unfolded before them. The current Bella clearly seemed unable to control output at this level yet, and Gray immediately felt that something was wrong. But Bella did not care about the risk at all. She only wanted to verify the new magic, and kept chanting nonstop. A golden light completely wrapped around Gray's body, and then that golden light shot straight into the sky. Gray stared in shock. Bella had this kind of scale even 10 years earlier? This was far too exaggerated. No wonder she would become a main force in the future. At that moment, a mass of flaming power rushed straight toward Gray's face, but just before it hit, the magic suddenly changed direction. Clearly, Bella was controlling it. A surge of wild joy rose in Bella's heart. She had succeeded on the first try, and she could even try to suppress it and pull it back. Under her control, the flame slowly changed shape and finally condensed into a fire dragon. Gray quietly marveled inwardly. Bella really was a genius. She understood such a complex structure after hearing it only once, and could even produce it directly. With Bella around, Gray even had the confidence that in the future she could cultivate a whole group of magical geniuses to fight Liquidator alongside him. This fire magic came fiercely and was withdrawn just as quickly. Soon, the ether inside Bella's body was completely drained. The utterly exhausted Bella collapsed straight to the ground, a classic case of magical overuse. Gray immediately rushed forward to check her condition, his tone tightening. Bella was one of the future's hopes, and absolutely nothing could happen to her. Behind him, Ariel told him to relax. She just fell asleep. Why are you so nervous? Bella is very innocent right now, so don't let your thoughts run wild. Gray was so exasperated by that he almost laughed, but he could not be bothered to answer back. As long as Bella was fine, that was all that mattered. Bella gazed at the flames still lingering in the sky, her eyes full of disbelief. She had actually constructed magic of this scale in such a short time. It was unbelievable. Just then, half awake, Bella murmured softly, "The amazing one isn't me. It's that theory. The only reason I could make supercompressed ether so easily is because of Lord Gray's knowledge." What she did not know was that the theory had originally been created by her future self. Gray had only spoken it aloud ahead of time. Professor Ariel gave a light laugh. "Since she can produce supercompressed ether, then she won't need the surgery. I'll personally notify Bradley." Cancelled. Gray let out a breath of relief. At least she had avoided that high-risk operation. What pleased him even more was that Bella had not lost control. She had kept her grasp over magic. That alone was enough to show how terrifying she was. Gray turned his head and could not help asking Ariel, "What you said just now was control?" "That's right, control. Bradley's surgery could increase magical output, but the price was sacrificing control. The principle was confidential, but it seemed to be achieved by forcibly breaking through a limiter." After hearing Ariel's explanation, Gray stroked his chin. So that was it. In the previous timeline, the witch had been unable to control her powerful magic, and it really had been because of that surgery. Professor Ariel burst into laughter. "But thanks to you, Bella can now create supercompressed ether. That means the conditions of our contract have been fulfilled." Professor Ariel raised her hand with a sweep. "Now it's my turn to fulfill the contract. First, your arm." Ariel thought for a moment. "I'll cast a spell on you. It's called Heal, and it can repair your arm." In the next moment, blue magical energy emerged in Ariel's palm, and Gray froze at the sight. She pressed that mass of energy onto the back of Gray's hand and began treating his injured right arm. A powerful healing force wrapped around the entire arm, carrying a slight cool sensation. The healing ended quickly, and Ariel asked him, "How does it feel?" Gray moved his wrist and found that it was indeed much better than before. Even more exaggerated, his wrist had actually recovered the same flexibility it used to have. Gray was so excited that his words sped up. "Thank you so much. In that case, does this mean I finally meet the standard?" But Gray could not help feeling puzzled as well. If even magical healing potions could not cure this injury, why could Ariel fix it so easily? Ariel smiled. "Don't compare my nerve restoration magic to ordinary healing potions." Ariel still was not fully at ease. "Can you really use it like before? Do you want to try swinging your sword?" Gray walked to one side and slowly drew his sword. Then, as Professor Ariel suggests, "I'll test the flexibility of my arm." He lightly swung a single strike. But Gray felt something was off, so he looked at his wrist and prepared to try again. With a few swishing sounds, he swung dozens of strikes in succession, each one according to his old speed and standard. But the result still was not ideal enough, and sweat appeared on Gray's forehead. He stopped moving and looked at Ariel. "My arm still can't move as flexibly as it used to." Ariel pressed a hand to her forehead and sighed. "Just as I thought. I repaired your nerves, but my magic can't heal the damage to your soul." Gray froze. Did something like the soul really exist? Ariel nodded. "You heard correctly. The soul really does exist. Although current magical studies haven't proven it, I believe it truly exists." That was because Ariel had a terrifying, heaven-defying ability. Her eyes could see souls. She had never told anyone this. In her vision, Gray's soul was slowly healing itself and would recover naturally. As long as he did not overdraw his swordsmanship too much, his arm would return to a usable state. Gray listened in a daze. "I can't overexert myself. So does that mean I can't practice swordsmanship for a while?" Ariel told him not to panic. Practicing at his usual intensity was completely fine. But deep down, Ariel had always been burdened by one question. What kind of swordsmanship could injure a person's soul like this? Gray did not answer, and she tactfully changed the subject. "Still, there is indeed a precedent for a sword technique called soul-driven sword." Ariel's expression turned serious. "That person is called Amy White. You know her, right?" Gray's heart shook. He did know her. But why was Ariel bringing up the Sword Saint at this point in time? By all logic, they should have had no connection right now. The reason Ariel was certain Gray knew Amy was because the shadow of Gray's sword swings resembled hers too closely, so closely that it cannot be a coincidence. But there's also a subtle difference. The person who taught you swordsmanship seems to be stronger than Amy. That was why she was confused. But in a few more years, Amy will reach the same level as your master. Ariel's judgment surprised Gray. She had even guessed that much. But no matter how perceptive she was, she could never guess the truth. Gray swordsmanship had been learned from Amy 10 years in the future. Of course he could not say that, so he changed his answer and said that he had studied swordsmanship at a dojo in his hometown. Can swordsmanship really injure the soul? Ariel denied it directly. Ordinary swordsmanship could never cause soul damage. To begin with, how could an ordinary sword strike defeat an ogre general? Not to mention that the strike had severed the surrounding monsters and trees together. Even the trees had been cut down. And what she was referring to was exactly the scene where Gray had killed the ogre general before. It seemed she had investigated it long ago. Ariel gave a low laugh. Of course, that's why I was basically guaranteed to win that bet. Ariel had seen the wreckage at the scene, and the sight had been spectacular. Even the highest level severing magic could not produce that kind of cut. So she concluded that there had to be some mysterious power inside Gray, and that he had used it. Her deduction was already infinitely close to the truth, and Gray almost wished she would simply see it clearly with her eyes. In the next moment, Ariel's pupils changed again. I can see power seeping out from a door bound in chains. At last, Gray became fully alert. There was definitely something seriously unusual about Ariel, because she had really seen the door inside him. That could not be guessed, which meant she knew far more. Ariel raised one finger and said to Gray, "Also, I've seen a similar power before. I'm not sure whether it's the same kind, but it feels very similar." Gray immediately pressed her. "What exactly is this similar power you're talking about? Besides me, is there someone else who possesses this too?" Ariel answered with certainty. "I'm not sure whether they're human. They're called Liquidator. That is their name." At that moment, Gray completely lost his composure. How much did Ariel actually know? Why was Liquidator being mentioned in this era? Ariel kept her eyes fixed on Gray's expression. "You've heard of them?" She continued, "Judging by that reaction, you really do know them. Honestly, I didn't expect them to be that famous. But since you even know magical theory that far ahead of its time, then it's not so strange." Gray felt a little awkward. That was just future knowledge. No one had discovered it yet. Ariel asked directly, "How much do you know about Liquidator? Tell me everything today." Gray was still hesitating over whether to tell the truth. Even if he did, she might not believe him. "I only know this. They are extremely dangerous to humanity, and absurdly powerful. So they must be stopped before they appear. If that can't be done, then they must be destroyed at any cost." Ariel thought for a moment, then nodded. "What you're saying is extreme, but I agree, they are extremely dangerous. But even so, Varian Bradley still intends to continue his experiments." Gray was stunned. "That madman. What does he have to do with Liquidator?" Ariel gave a cold laugh. "A great deal. According to the intelligence she had, those Liquidators were exactly the beings Bradley was trying to summon." Gray froze completely. Liquidators had actually been created by humans? But then why had he never heard this inside story in the future? But on second thought, the Academy's reaction in the previous timeline had indeed seemed like they already knew Liquidator would appear. A terrifying possibility crawled up Gray's back. Could it be that the Academy had been involved in the plan to summon Liquidator from the very beginning? If that was true, then the Academy was the starting point of every disaster. Without thinking, Gray blurted out that Ariel had to stop the experiment. Ariel wanted to stop it too. But the professor responsible for the experiment was of the same rank as she was, and she had no authority to shut down his research. She had once pressured the upper ranks to cancel it, only to be directly ignored. Gray pressed further. Who exactly were these so-called upper ranks? Ariel shook her head. His authority was too high. Unless an even higher order came down, no one could forcibly stop the experiment. Gray sighed heavily inside. They would not even tell names? The Academy's power structure was even more complex and darker than he had imagined. Gray suddenly thought of something. If they could prove that Madman was a criminal, wouldn't that solve everything immediately? In the previous timeline, Bradley's illegal experiments had killed tens of thousands, and Gray even knew where he had conducted them. Thinking of this, Gray immediately proposed, "I know the location of Varian's illegal experiment site. If we go catch him in the act, we might be able to solve this completely." Ariel rejected it again. "No. Entering a professor's research facility without permission is itself a serious crime. If you can't produce solid evidence, then the ones who'll end up in prison will be us. Do you have evidence right now?" Gray fell silent. Of course he had no evidence he could present immediately. Without evidence, this matter could only be suppressed for the moment. After that, the topic came to a temporary end. Ariel brought the conversation back to Gray's power. "Don't you want to learn to control it?" Gray's heart jolted. Could Ariel actually help him control that power? She shook her head. "I can't teach you. But there is a professor in the Academy who is best at dealing with unknown powers. His name was Hethkid." Gray's heart tightened violently. Hethkid was the very man who had personally trained the Sword Saint. Ariel looked as if she had expected exactly this reaction. "Starting tomorrow, I'll arrange private training with him for you." Gray almost shouted in his heart. Wonderful. The reason he had come to the Academy was precisely to learn to control that power. And now the clue had come this quickly. The next day, Gray began special training under a true powerhouse. The person training Gray at this moment was none other than Heathkit Longfellow himself. But Gray had not expected that the so-called special training would consist of nothing but running. Although he did not know what his teacher intended to teach, whatever the man said, he would obey. At that moment, Heathkit suddenly turned his head. "Your mind is unstable. I can feel it. Since you still have the energy to let your thoughts wander, speed up for me, run like your life depends on it. Listen carefully. Only when you squeeze out every last drop of strength will the power of your soul awaken. As long as you have even a trace of energy left, we will not touch that sword." Gray more or less understood. Even if he did not fully understand, he would still do it, because the other man was one of the strongest. And so, Gray was tormented by him for an entire week. A week later, Gray returned to Ariel, who asked him how things had been with Heathkit. Gray felt a little embarrassed. "Nothing in particular. Every day was just running. But my body really has gotten stronger. As for swordsmanship, we only practiced a little at the very end." Ariel laughed softly. "That really does sound like that old monster style." At that moment, someone pushed the door open, interrupting them. He handed Ariel a letter. Gray did not know whether it was just his imagination, but Ariel's body seemed to be trembling as she read it. In the next second, her expression darkened into fury. Gray immediately stepped forward. What happened with that letter? But when Gray saw the contents clearly, his face sank just as heavily as hers. The letter said, although Bella had produced supercompressed ether, examination showed that it was not true compression, and therefore it could not be recognized as supercompressed ether. Signed, Varian Bradley. Gray was so angry he wanted to curse out loud. That man was a complete lunatic. Ariel told Gray to stay calm. Bradley was determined to force Bella into surgery, even though she no longer needed it. Gray proposed that Bella simply refuse, but reality was cruel. The contract existed, so she could not refuse. Unless Bradley himself voided the contract, Bella had only two paths: withdraw from the academy, or undergo the surgery. This dreadful news sent a chill down Gray's back. If the surgery happened, Bella would be finished. Ariel slammed her hand on the table. "I need your help." It turned out Ariel wanted Gray to confirm exactly where Bradley's laboratory was. As long as his crimes were exposed, the contract would automatically become invalid. Hearing this, Gray actually laughed. "I remember you telling me before that without evidence, it would be dangerous. So why are you no longer afraid of danger now?" The reason Ariel made this decision was because she trusted Gray. As long as they found the place, they would definitely find evidence. Perhaps Ariel had believed Gray from the very beginning. Her eyes had long since given her the answer. She could be sure that Gray had been telling the truth all along. It had simply taken her too long to admit it. Gray said quietly, "You should have done this earlier. Trust me more from now on. I won't lie to you." Ariel nodded. "Then lead the way now. The two of us will expose everything that man has done." Gray told Ariel. Bradley's laboratory was in the mountains near Tyrul village. Ariel was somewhat familiar with that mountain as well. "I never would have thought he was hiding in such a small mountain village." Gray added, Varian had an authorized laboratory, but what he was doing inside it was illegal experimentation. Ariel agreed. The place really was an ideal hiding spot. Professors in the academy usually did not interfere in one another's affairs, and as long as they obtained evidence of a crime, they would not be accused in turn of illegal trespassing. Just then, Bella suddenly walked in from outside the door. Her expression was heavy as she held out the letter in her hand. "I received this letter today as well." Ariel stepped forward and caught the envelope between two fingers. She told Bella not to worry. She and Gray would handle it. Bella seemed to see through her intentions. "You're going to fight them for my sake? By yourself?" Ariel's steps paused, and the corners of her lips curved slightly. She turned back to look at Bella. "I'm enough on my own." Bella still looked uneasy, and turned to Gray. At that moment, Gray spoke up. "Wait, I'm going with you." Bella also immediately stated her position. This concerned her life, so she had to go too. Ariel only felt an even worse headache coming on. What you're up against is a madman who has carried out dangerous human experiments many times. If he gets hold of either of you, no one knows what he might do, so I can't let you take that risk. But Gray disagreed. "Professor, it's even more dangerous if you go alone. If I use the power that brought down the Ogre General, I can help you. And if you disappear, then I, as your Eye of God student, will also be expelled. So at the very least, let us decide our own fate. We won't hold you back. We'll be additional fighting strength." Ariel looked into the eyes of the two of them and fell into thought. Then she let out a heavy sigh. "It sounds like even if I stop you, you'll still come along." "I can agree, but on one condition. No matter what happens, your first priority is your own safety." The two of them answered at the same time. Understood. Even if she had not said it, they already knew. After that, they immediately headed for that mountain. Gray led the two of them and stopped in front of a house. Bella frowned. "Is he really conducting illegal experiments here?" Professor Ariel's tone was cold. "Don't doubt it. We're going in right now to find evidence. I can guarantee that he is definitely inside." Hearing Gray say that, both of their gazes instantly sharpened. "If you can guarantee it, then we'll trust you." Ariel added one piece of good news. Varian should currently be at a meeting at the Magic Association, so he was probably not here. But the front entrance was likely trapped, so they would force their way in through the side door. What came next was Ariel's moment to shine. Bella asked again in a small voice, "Are you really going this far for me? Someone like me. Is it worth it?" Gray cut her off directly. "That sentence is wrong. Stopping Varian is for this world, not just for you. Understand?" At Ariel's command, the three of them charged in at the same time. Gray was even faster, rushing straight to the front. Fire magic gathered in Ariel's palm. With one sweeping motion, she blasted a sheet of flames forward and shattered the main door on the spot. Her firepower was absurdly strong. One casual magic blast caused this much destruction. Even Gray was shaken. "Weren't we supposed to be sneaking in? This is way too loud." After blowing a hole in the sidewall, they immediately entered through the breach. But when Gray saw the scene inside clearly, his whole body froze. The ground was covered in corpses. They were all Bradley's test subjects. Gray's eyes instantly darkened, and his anger nearly overflowed. Ariel had originally intended to search carefully for evidence, but after one glance, evidence was everywhere. At that moment, they noticed something ahead. Not far away stood something like an altar. Bella was at a loss. "What do we do now? Take the evidence and leave as planned, or save the people who are still alive first?" Gray turned to her and said, "We can't stay here long. The longer we drag this out, the more likely Varian is to return." The moment Gray finished speaking, an unfamiliar man's voice sounded from behind them. A figure slowly approached. "Were you calling for me just now?" When Ariel saw the newcomer, her tone dropped. "How was the meeting, Varian?" The person walking toward them now was none other than the evil experimenter, Professor Varian. Gray immediately took up a combat stance. He had never expected Varian to appear here. Varian spoke slowly. "I arranged for a stand-in to attend the meeting. I have a more important experiment here, so there's no way I would leave." Ariel frowned. "What exactly is this important experiment you're talking about?" Varian had recently acquired a batch of fresh materials, so he wanted to carry out the experiment immediately while they were still fresh. But the plan had been disrupted, because they had broken in. He now had to alter the process on the spot. At this moment, even Ariel could no longer keep her expression steady. The killing intent was too intense. Gray, on the other hand, was calmer. They had seen what they should not have seen, so the other side was bound to silence them. Varian's gaze pinned them like nails. He did not know where they had gotten the address, but he was sure of one thing: they had not told anyone else in advance. So as long as the three of them disappeared, no one would direct suspicion toward him. Hearing that, Bella nearly froze in fear. Ariel suppressed her fury. "Don't tell me you intend to use us as lab rats." Varian merely smiled. "Don't be so agitated. Your deaths will push the boundaries of magic forward. Since I can't let you leave here alive, I'll make sure you provide the greatest possible value." In the next second, a huge fireball smashed straight toward Varian's face and caught him off guard. With a booming explosion, even the walls trembled. Ariel glanced sideways at Bella. She had not expected the girl to strike so decisively. Bella's expression was cold and rigid. Clearly, she hated Varian to the extreme and had not hesitated at all. But what none of them had expected was, Bella's attack had done no damage to Varian at all. Varian sounded almost complimentary. "I have got Ariel, still as seasoned as ever. I didn't expect even a special admit like you to have such outstanding talent. In that case, he would have to be even more cautious. After all, besides Bella, there was another Eye of God candidate present. As for your little trick, I can't praise it. A student daring to assassinate a teacher truly doesn't know whether she lives or dies." Bella gave a cold laugh. "I'd rather kill first than be killed by you. Too bad I didn't seize the chance to blow you to pieces in one shot just now." Ariel immediately told the two of them to retreat. The situation was already out of control. They had the evidence. The rest could be left to the academy. But just because they wanted to leave did not mean Varian would let them. He instantly released dark magic, aiming straight at Bella. In that critical instant, Ariel immediately spread a golden barrier, shielding Bella behind her. Ariel urged Bella again to leave quickly. She would handle things here. But Varian cut her off directly. "Whatever you do is useless. This is one of my creations, Devouring Flame." This magic released flames that devoured defensive spells and converted the defenses they consumed into power for itself. The two forces remained locked for a moment, and Ariel's barrier began to shake, on the verge of cracking. In theory, this thing was almost impossible to block. Its only flaw was that it required rare materials. Before long, Ariel's golden barrier was on the verge of being completely swallowed. In the next second, blue light burst from Ariel's eyes. Immediately after, a blue magic array layered itself behind the golden one, another defensive spell. But the black flame showed no fear at all and slammed directly into it. Cracks immediately appeared in the barrier again. Ariel urgently told Bella to hand the spell memory pouch to Gray. She had already recorded the entire scene, and once it was given to Heathkit, he would know how to handle it. But Bella did not respond. Instead, she slammed her staff hard against the ground. Centered on Bella, another circular defensive magic array rose up. Ariel became furious. "What are you doing? I told you to leave." Bella could not abandon Ariel. She had seen that the barrier was already breaking, so she had to add another layer of defense. Ariel's voice tightened in anger. "We agreed before we came, if something went wrong, survival came first. Varian's magic is clearly abnormal. It can even devour defenses. I'll stall for time. You two retreat immediately." But before she even finished speaking, her defensive barrier shattered outright. For the first time, fear appeared in Ariel's eyes. It had been broken through in only 2 minutes. There was something seriously wrong with this magic. But Bella was strangely calm. It doesn't matter if Professor's barrier broke. The black flames continued forward and began clashing head-on with Bella's defensive array. In Bella's eyes, Variant's spell was not invincible. It merely required a defense built on a different logic to oppose it. Varian was shaken to the core. "Impossible. Only we know the counter-theory for devouring flame. How do you understand it?" Bella smiled faintly. "Someone recently taught me a new theory. With it, every magical formula becomes simple in front of me." Varian's mouth twitched. "You mean to say, you broke my dark magic using a new theory alone?" He did not believe it at all, and demanded that Bella reveal who the traitor was. "Tell me, and I'll grant you a quick death." "You want to know who taught me? Too bad. It's a secret. There's no way I'd tell you." Gray had not expected Bella to reveal such a pure side of herself at a time like this. But in the next second, Gray stared sharply ahead, his expression changing at once. He warned Bella that she had to be careful. This next attack was not simple. Varian pulled out a red stone. Then, on the spot, he crushed it in his hand. "Since you all want to die so badly, then die in its flames." More than 10 fire monsters burst out from the red stone. They tangled together like coiled rope. Then they twisted into a terrifying giant maw and lunged straight at them. Gray told Bella to be careful, and Bella gritted her teeth and said she could still hold on. But she was beginning to panic too. Her magic power was almost depleted. Varian said coldly, "With the reserves you have, you can last at most 1 minute." Bella trembled anxiously. "Professor, hurry and attack him. I'll devote everything to defense." As soon as Bella finished speaking, blue light burst from Ariel's eyes. Her Eye of God was searching for the weak point in Varian's magic. Once she found it, she could project her own magic power beyond the barrier. Ariel raised her hand, and a thread of electricity leaked out from outside the barrier. After locking onto the weak point, she held nothing back, and lightning surged violently across her whole body. With a low shout from Ariel, a torrent of lightning blasted fiercely toward the opponent's dark magic. The lightning was extremely fast and immensely powerful. But the terrible part was, she had not found the true way to break it, and the instant the lightning touched the black flames, it was devoured, until not a trace of it remained. Variant snorted coldly. "Trying to counterattack? Wishful thinking. Right now, you can't even touch me." Ariel's heart sank. The devouring power was stronger than expected. Gray also saw the problem. Ariel's offensive magic was already relatively weak among the instructors, and the special property of these black flames was to absorb spell structures, growing stronger the more they were attacked. At that moment, Bella finally could not hold on any longer. "My magic power is running dry. What do we do now?" Her hands and her body were trembling slightly, and even standing steadily was becoming difficult. Ariel gritted her teeth. "This is exactly why I told you two to leave first. You still underestimated Variant too much." The situation had completely turned into certain doom for all of them, and at that moment, Gray stepped forward. "Leave it to me. You two take a break first. The substitute is going in." Ariel and Bella could not believe it. "Even we can't stop him. And you think you can handle this?" Bella urgently reminded him. "Your sword can't even reach him." Gray only said, "It doesn't matter. Just watch what I do next." Ariel seemed to guess something, and her voice tightened. "Are you sure you want to do this? If you use that power again, you may die. Even if you survive, your healed arm may never recover again." A cold edge lifted at the corner of Gray's mouth. "If only I die, that's still better than all 3 of us dying here." Varian's view was blocked by the black flames, and he could not see inside, but he saw a red glow expanding. Immediately after, he saw a boy swing a sword in midair. His perspective was upside down. Because Varian's head had already been cut off by Gray. Gray killed Varian with a single strike, and the power of that blow was something Varian could not block at all. Gray's eyes were cold to the extreme. "Someone like you should have died long ago." What stood before them now was nothing but a headless body. Bella could not believe it at all. Gray's one sword strike had directly overturned her entire understanding of the world. With a thud, Varian's body and severed head hit the ground at the same time. Even Ariel's eyes widened in shock. She had investigated the traces of Gray's battle with the ogre general, but seeing it with her own eyes was on an entirely different level. Even if they told others about this, no one would believe it. It was too absurd. At that moment, Bella noticed bits of rubble falling from above. In the next second, the entire ceiling began to collapse. The aftermath of that strike had already affected the structure. But just then, a light set of footsteps stepped forward. With every step, ripples spread beneath the feet. Immediately after, countless pink laser arrays rose from the ground and pinned every falling stone in midair. Ariel was still immersed in shock. Varian's magic had countered her, but controlling a collapse at this level was only a minor matter for her. She turned and looked at Gray. "Is your body all right?" That strike was excessive. With a clatter, the sword in Gray's hand fell to the ground. He could not explain why either. His dominant hand just hurt so badly it felt numb, as if it had been torn apart. Gray bent down and picked up the sword. "Don't worry too much. I can still move." Ariel gave a light laugh. "Much better than before, right? Your training is starting to show results." Gray agreed. If the Gray of now had used that move back in the village, at most his arm would have hurt. The old him would have blacked out for days, and when he woke up he would not even have been able to raise his arm. It seemed that week of running with Hethkit really had been worth it. Gray did not notice that Ariel was staring at his right hand the whole time. She used her Eye of God again to observe the structure of his right arm. There seemed to be new damage inside it now. She walked up to Gray and said in a low voice, "Thanks to you, we survived. But I'm sorry you had to use that power again." Gray told her not to take it to heart. The one who had insisted on coming and insisted on stopping Varian had been him in the first place. But Ariel still insisted on thanking him properly. Yet what she said next made Gray pause. She wanted him not to use that power again for the time being. Ariel was almost pleading. "Please trust my Eye of God. If this continues, your damage will become irreversible." Gray froze for a moment. Then he nodded. "Understood." At that moment, Bella behind them could not help asking Gray something. She wanted to know, had that just been magic? If it was, there was no way she could have failed to sense ether fluctuations. Calling that kind of power magic felt far too forced, so what exactly had he used? But Ariel cut her off directly. "Sorry, but don't ask any more about this. And don't mention to anyone anything you saw here today." Bella, her curiosity fully ignited, still wanted to press for an answer. Ariel sighed helplessly, and magic began gathering in her palm. She looked at Bella seriously. "If you can't agree to that, then I'll have no choice but to erase your memory. Choose now, memory erasure, or signing a magic contract." Bella went pale with fright. She obviously did not want to lose her memory, so she had no choice but to choose the contract. Ariel casually produced a magical contract, which floated before Bella. Bella signed her name without hesitation. This matter ended here, and she would pursue it no further. Ariel asked Gray what they should do next, and Gray said, although he was also worried about the experiments, what mattered most now was giving these people release. These test subjects looked like corpses on the surface, but in fact they had only been put into a magical coma. Ariel snapped her fingers. "They're not in mortal danger for the time being, but for safety's sake, we need to send them to the Academy's medical facility." In the next second, a massive golden light appeared before them. The golden light wrapped around all the test subjects, at the very least protecting them temporarily from external harm. After dealing with the test subjects, Ariel proposed that they continue investigating deeper. Even after looking over the scene again, she still found it hard to believe. Illegal experiments had been carried out right under her nose. Nearly every project involved using human sacrifices to create magical catalysts, or strengthening human magical ability through cruel means, and every single one was chilling. But Ariel saw nothing related to Liquidator among the experiments. Could it be somewhere else? Gray also felt something was wrong. In the world he had known before, a disaster here had killed tens of thousands. How could merely making catalysts cause a catastrophe on that scale? Suddenly, Gray's eyes widened sharply. He remembered the key point. In that past world, what had killed those people was miasma surging up from the ground. The moment he thought of this, Gray immediately called out to Ariel and Bella ahead of him. Bella asked in confusion, "What did you think of? You look really tense." Of course Gray was tense. He felt that something might be hidden below. If it really was Liquidator, his scalp would go numb on the spot. Gray told Ariel his guess. There might be a hidden passage underground. Ariel looked at the ground doubtfully. That doesn't seem very likely, does it? Who builds a laboratory underground? Her Eye of God swept across every crack in the floor. But unfortunately she could not see any trace of a passage, which meant Gray might be wrong. Ariel was just about to tell Gray the result when her gaze suddenly froze. She gave a low command, "Don't move." Then she jogged forward. She crouched down and examined the ground with extreme care. The Eye of God activated again. The trace was faint, but she caught it. Residual fluctuations of short-range teleportation magic remained here, which meant there might be an independent space accessible only by teleportation. Judging from the residual trail, The teleportation distance was about 300 meters. There was definitely something hidden below. Gray immediately asked whether they could reach 300 meters underground. Ariel said yes, she could open a short-range teleportation gate. Ariel snapped her fingers. Then let's try it. In the next moment, a magic array unfolded before them. If there was nothing there, then the other side of the gate would open only into Earth. Then the portal of the magic array slowly opened. What lay beyond the door made all three of them freeze on the spot. Ahead of them was an underground space, with houses of various sizes scattered throughout. Ariel was so shocked she could not speak. Who would have imagined that such an enormous space was hidden beneath this place? Bella also immediately sensed something strange. There were massive ether outputs in every direction, especially from the center. That energy was the most terrifying. What she was pointing at was a small house in the center, surrounded tightly by several pillars. Ariel's eyes trembled. It's not just ether, there's another kind of power too. A power completely different from magic is leaking out from there, and it's absurdly strong. Hearing that, Gray had already guessed the answer in his heart. Could this power be? Ariel cut him off. Your guess is correct. The power sealed inside that little house is the power of Liquidator. After that, the group stepped into the underground space. Directly in front of them stood a door. All three of them almost simultaneously thought the source of this power should be behind that door. Ariel carefully inspected the surroundings and could clearly feel the pressure of that power, but for the moment she could not see any sign of a Liquidator. Then Ariel reached out and opened the door, and sure enough, nothing happened. She could confirm that the door itself had no reaction of power whatsoever. This door was more like a symbolic object of the ritual, deliberately placed here, so the power did not come from the door itself, but from somewhere else. Ariel narrowed her eyes and looked at the purple jar beside the door, judging that the thing truly carrying the power should be this magical device. Immediately after, Ariel made a move so bold it was almost insane. Gray's expression changed on the spot. Are you crazy? Are you trying to summon a Liquidator? Bella also tensed immediately. This kind of magic was too dangerous and had to be stopped at once. But Ariel was abnormally calm. Neither of you move. My prediction tells me this device cannot summon a Liquidator, so relax. With a crack, a tearing sound actually came from the door. In the next second, the fissure rapidly widened, and only darkness remained behind the door. Gray and Bella were both stunned. Space was torn open. What exactly did you do? Ariel's attack had forcibly drawn out a trace of energy from that space. Gray stared fixedly at that massive black aura. This was the power of Liquidator. Only then did Ariel fully confirm that this device was not used for summoning at all. They were merely tearing a tiny opening into the place where the Liquidators existed, then drawing out the leaking energy. In the middle of the room, a mass of black energy floated and churned continuously. The core they used to crystallize this energy was very likely human life. From what she could see, at least 10 souls had been consumed, and the lives sacrificed in the shaping process were likely even more numerous. All of these conclusions came from what Ariel had personally seen with the divine eye. She judged that most of the people upstairs had probably been taken away as raw materials. Bella bit her lip. Why are they going to such lengths to collect this kind of power? What exactly do they want to do with it? Ariel told Bella to think back. The black flames Varian used in the fight just now were abnormal. The source of those black flames was the red crystal he crushed. That was basically already a finished product. And that kind of catalyst would not be used only for flames. If they can mass produce it, who knows what it will be used for. Just then, the crack in the door began to close slowly. After hearing Ariel's deduction, Gray came to a judgment as well. Varian perhaps did not want to summon a Liquidator at all. As for whether he had never tried or simply could not do it, Gray had no way of knowing. And from what they could see now, this cracking device already seemed overloaded, as if it had been drained to its limit. Bella looked over the surrounding devices, her voice tightening. She had never seen such precise, high-output spatial distortion magic before, and its value was definitely astronomical. Ariel picked up her words as well. That's right, building even one would burn through an entire nation's budget, yet there are 8 here, and only... A name surfaced in her mind. Bella tested the waters. The Discar Empire? Unfortunately, she guessed wrong. Even if the Empire was powerful, it might not have magical research resources of this level. It might not even be able to make one. If not the Empire, then what other nation would dare spend money like this? Ariel said quietly. There had to be an organization whose magical research surpassed even the Empire's. Gray spoke slowly. The one you mean is the World United Academy, right? Other than that, I can't think of a second one. Bella's heart sank. How could this possibly be the World United Academy? Ariel nodded coldly. You guessed right, only the World United Academy can support this scale and this budget. It seems the matter of Liquidator is inseparable from the Academy. Slow to react by half a beat, Bella finally understood. You mean, the Academy is manipulating all of this behind the scenes? But the World United Academy is supposed to protect the world. Ariel sighed. You're too innocent. I don't understand why you still refuse to believe it now. Other than them, there is no other organization capable of this, understand? But Gray offered a different judgment. That doesn't mean the entire academy is the enemy, right? Most people are still on humanity's side. At least before Gray was reborn, the academy's strongest forces had all been fighting on the front lines. They had not hidden in the rear to survive. They had stood at the very front as the main force against the liquidators, even stronger than the suppression squad. They protected civilians until the very last moment. Having experienced that future, Gray could not believe that the academy as a whole was humanity's enemy. Ariel nodded. You're right. Most of the academy may truly be acting for humanity and would never allow this kind of life-wasting experiment. But there are too many researchers in the academy. Everyone has their own goals. Their views are not unified, and their actions are even less so. What's more, there are countless facilities. Almost no one in this world has truly seen the whole picture. The person behind Varian gave him tremendous support. With Varian's authority alone, he could never have arranged all this. Bella clenched her teeth. Then doesn't that mean we can't fully trust even the academy? We'll be in a very passive position. Ariel's eyes seemed to sink into an old shadow. After watching the academy from the inside for decades, she was certain this was not an organization one could trust blindly. Many people might truly believe they were benefiting humanity, and perhaps even the planners themselves had convinced themselves of that. But the truth was often buried in darkness, and no one could dig all of it out completely. Gray told Ariel to keep searching and see whether there were any clues here pointing to the mastermind behind it. Unfortunately, there was no communication equipment here, and not even magical residue from the makers had been left behind. It had been wiped clean, making it almost impossible to follow any trail. There's one more point besides that. But just as Ariel was about to continue, a violent explosion suddenly sounded behind Bella. Gray was startled. What happened? But the explosion was not aimed at them. It was more like some kind of self-destruct mechanism. Ariel saw through it at a glance. They installed an evidence destruction device. It didn't explode immediately because it was meant to lure any intruders in first, then blow the device, erasing both people and evidence together. Bella said urgently, "This is not the time for reasoning. We have to get out immediately." Ariel gave a light laugh. "Why are you so shaken? This is only magical explosive." She suddenly pressed her hand against the ground. A professor of the World United Academy isn't going to be helpless against something like this. As she spoke, golden light spread across the ground. "If I were to die from something like this, then I wouldn't deserve to be your teacher." Before the underground structure collapsed, Ariel directly activated golden teleportation magic. In the next second, golden light wrapped around the three of them. Right after that, the light grew more and more blinding, and the three of them vanished from where they stood, along with the 8 magical devices. 3 seconds later, on the lawn outside the academy building, Ariel had teleported them to open ground, and had even brought out some of the surviving people from upstairs as well. Gray swept his eyes over the survivors. They were all alive, but clearly had suffered greatly. Bella finally let out a breath of relief. Just now, she had truly thought she was going to die. Thanks to the professor's teleportation array. Gray also sighed inwardly. This had been far too dangerous. Ariel smiled faintly. "After you go through it a few more times, you'll get used to it. We brought more luggage than I expected, so the teleportation was a bit slower, but it was worth it. These 8 devices are ironclad evidence. Once we place them in front of the academy, they won't be able to pretend not to see anymore." In the blink of an eye, they had returned to the academy. The professor sitting before them said, "The survivors you brought back have already been sent to the academy infirmary for treatment." And seated at the head was none other than the headmaster of the World United Academy, Orodam Alexander. "Thanks to you, Varian's illegal experiments have been stopped." Then he picked up the report on the magical engines on the table. Each one of those things was worth more than an entire nation's budget. Ariel spoke with concern suppressed in her voice. There were 8 devices at the scene. There's no way Varian could have assembled something on this scale by himself. How did he get them? There must be someone behind him, right? Alexander slowly put down the report. These engines were stolen goods. They were hijacked during transport, and all 78 transport personnel were killed. All 3 of them were stunned at once. They had not expected this to be tied to a large-scale robbery and massacre. Ariel's gaze turned cold. "You mean that incident from 15 years ago?" Alexander nodded. "These engines were among the cargo stolen back then. And the culprits were the bloodthirsters. You've heard that name, right?" Of course Gray had heard of them. The world's largest criminal organization. Like a parasite that could return no matter how many times it was smashed apart. Gray sensed that Bella's aura had changed and immediately looked at her warily. He saw that gentle Bella, for the first time, had an anger on her face she could not suppress. "It was them. They killed my parents." Alexander sighed with a headache. "That is exactly why, even after wiping them out hundreds of times, they still come back. No one knows where they are, and no one knows who their leader is. It is said that more than 70% of all crime-related deaths come from them. Even if their people had infiltrated the academy, I wouldn't be surprised. But even worse, we can't identify them. Even if there is evidence, the academy will not act easily. Gray frowned impressed. What do you mean? There are criminals in the academy, and they still won't arrest them? Ariel took over, her tone calm but sharp. That is how the academy operates. Anyone with talent can become stronger there, regardless of bloodline, race, or gender. That is their style. Even if the person is a criminal, they can still be accepted. Bella found it absurd. If there were criminals, then they should be dealt with. Alexander also agreed with Bella's instinct, but the upper ranks did not think that way. Bella asked in confusion, the headmaster doesn't count as upper rank? Alexander gave an awkward smile. I'm only a subordinate. I don't count as upper rank. Nominally I'm the face of the academy, but in reality my authority is laughably small. Do you want to know who truly controls everything? Gray and Bella both nodded at the same time. They both wanted to know whose hand was behind the curtain. But Alexander would not say it now. Keep getting stronger. Only by becoming stronger will you be qualified to know more. Only when you possess enough power can you approach the academy's core. When that time comes, the truth you want will naturally surface. He could not point directly, but he gave them a hint. You have a senior here whose influence is enough to sway the academy's direction. Even the mad policy of accepting criminals was approved by him. Gray understood. In other words, if we become strong enough to surpass that person, then we can change the academy? Alexander said no more. More or less. In this academy, strength is the rule. Gray and Bella clenched their fists at the same time. That moment only hardened their resolve. Alexander saw that scene, yet his heart sank even deeper. To him, this was still a mystery. Ariel could not possibly have been involved in opposing Varian. That meant among those two people, one of them had to be the mastermind. Ariel's eye of God was still as sharp as ever. Alexander even felt a faint expectation. I'm a little curious to see what level of monster she'll train. After leaving Alexander's office, Gray walked alone down the corridor. He lowered his head and looked at the black mark on his hand. It seemed that within the academy, if he wanted to bring down Liquidator and uncover the truth, the first thing there was only one thing to do, become stronger. At that moment, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Gray looked up, and someone kicked straight at his face. Gray instantly raised his arm to block, but the impact forced his body backwards several steps. The other person's strength was extremely heavy. Even though Gray had caught the kick, he was still driven sliding back. This guy's leg strength was like an iron hammer. But what Gray wanted to know more was, why attack without warning? If the other side could not give a reason, Gray would treat him as someone looking for trouble, and then he would not be blamed for striking hard. But the man said coldly that Gray had no right to stand in this corridor. The reason was laughably poor. A special admit like you who got in through the eye of God has no right to stand here. Gray slowly drew his sword, another one who hated special admits. It was just that this was the first time someone had ambushed him in a hallway. But just as Gray was preparing to counterattack, the man said that he would gladly accompany him, but that the one stopping it had already arrived. Gray turned around and saw Ariel walking toward him. Gray frowned at the man. What exactly was he trying to do? The man turned and left, yet his thoughts churned. Sorry, the guard is too tight, I can't get any closer. Still, he would send someone else over as soon as possible. It was as if he were communicating with some existence, but only he himself knew with whom. Ariel walked up and asked Gray what had happened. Gray also found it ridiculous. A student suddenly kicked me just now. He said a special eye of God admit like me had no right to walk around the academy. Ariel looked carefully over the scene. He didn't use a weapon, didn't argue with you, and you weren't injured. So that means it'll be difficult for me to officially punish him. Ariel raised her hand and pointed in the direction the man had gone. Then why didn't you chase after him and beat him until he couldn't stand? Gray froze. Everyone was a fellow student. Was there really any need to go that far? Ariel let out a long sigh. As your professor, I really can't act publicly. Besides, if something really happens nearby, I may not be able to keep an eye on you all the time. Hearing Ariel's almost indulgent words, Gray thought about it and decided to let it go. He did not want to make the trouble bigger. Ariel actually had another question. Are Eye of God special admits really that unpopular? Gray nodded. The mockery had always been there, but for it to escalate into physical violence, this was the first time. Ariel confirmed again. So they really have been mocking you the whole time? Her expression even carried a trace of self-reproach. I'm sorry. If only I had more influence here. Gray told her not to dwell on it. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even have made it through the academy gates. And Bella and the others will prove that the Eye of God program is not wrong. Your judgment has never been mistaken. Gray thought of those people in his previous life. Without exception, they had all been main forces against Liquidator. Ariel was taken aback when she heard that. Then she smiled lightly and nodded her thanks to Gray. But she did not want Gray to treat everything as merely someone else's problem. Among the Divine Eye group, Gray was the one she had placed the greatest hopes on. Amy, Rick, Jacob, like the special admits before, they will all become top talents. But the first time I truly believed that someone could surpass humanity itself was when I met you. Gray had not expected Ariel to think so highly of him, even placing him together with those future powerhouses. But Gray also knew that his earlier thought of Forget It had been too weak. The mastermind behind Varian might not have given up on summoning Liquidator. He could not afford the slightest carelessness. That was an existence capable of erasing every powerhouse with a single blow. And there was only one reason he had returned to this timeline: to make sure he could defeat it and seize the fate of the world in his own hands. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days passed. Today, the teacher had arranged practical sparring for swordsmanship class. The teacher would pair students according to the list, and whoever was called in the same group would be each other's opponent. The moment he heard practical combat, Gray immediately tensed up. He had to stay sharp for this class. If he performed badly, everyone would once again dump the blame on the Divine Eye admits. At the very least, he had to prove that he could keep up with the level of ordinary students. Just then, something even more exasperating happened to Gray. It was practically like a natural nemesis. At the podium, the teacher wrote down 2 names, Gray and Leonhardt. Leonhardt was the top student in swordsmanship class, in other words, the strongest first year. The teacher slowly said, I will try my best to pair students of similar strength, so there's no need to hold back. Treat it like a real battle. Gray cursed the teacher countless times in his heart. This was called similar strength? He had only barely been admitted as a special admit, so how had he ended up against the top student? What's more, Leonhardt already hated Divine Eye students to begin with. After what happened last time, he was probably just itching to beat Gray until he couldn't stand. At that moment, Leonhardt behind Gray moved. I'd like to see what kind of trick you're planning. But to Gray's surprise, Leonhardt actually walked over to him and took the initiative to greet him. Gray's expression stiffened, completely unable to tell what this guy was trying to do. Leonhardt looked full of excitement. Looks like we got paired together. I'm truly delighted. But inwardly he was thinking, I can finally spar with Lord Gray. Taking first place in the class was absolutely worth it. I've trained harder than anyone else. Please, Lord Gray, witness my true swordsmanship with your own eyes. That line only made Gray more uncomfortable. Just as he had guessed, this guy really had come to settle the score. And that smile was far too fake. There was no doubt. He was excited because he could finally beat Gray up legally. At the teacher's command, the whole class split into pairs and took their places in the center of the field. In the next moment, the sparring began, and everyone fought desperately to win. This was their best chance to show themselves, and no one would let it pass. Leonhardt moved in an instant. Lord Gray, be careful. I'm coming. Their blades collided in a flash. Gray's heart sank. No wonder he was the top first-year student. Leonhardt's offense was not perfect, but it was already close to perfection. In the next second, Leonhardt knocked Gray flying back with a single strike. Immediately after, Leonhardt's body pressed forward in seamless continuation with the motion of his sword. At this moment, he was almost becoming one with the blade, every attack so sharp it felt oppressive. Leonhardt spoke as he fought. You're really strong. I can't believe you weren't admitted through the regular process. Gray was annoyed to hear that. If you've got time to chat, focus on the fight. In the blink of an eye, the two exchanged dozens more moves in the air. Both of them were moving at terrifying speed, but Gray was being suppressed the whole time. Even when he accelerated, he still could not shake Leonhardt off. But this too was within Gray's expectations. He had thought he would be crushed instantly, and had not expected to hold out this long. Even so, even using both arms, he still could not withstand Leonhardt's pure power. Leonhardt's swordsmanship was insane, orthodox, textbook perfect, full of clear form and discipline, yet trained to a frightening degree of mastery. Even with Gray's past life experience and his master's teaching, he could not be sure of a clean victory. Leonhardt stepped in and closed the distance to Gray in an instant. Gray met him with his sword braced, only to feel Leonhardt's blade as heavy as a mountain. Even worse, his stamina was beginning to fail him. Leonhardt laughed. In this state, I can fight for a whole day. If not for his special training with Heathkit, Gray would already have been beaten flat by Leonhardt. But how is this guy not even breathing hard? Is fighting me really this easy for him? Gray quickly felt his stamina nearing its limit. He had to end this fight. Then the teacher's words suddenly flashed through his mind. Treat this duel as a real battle. Gray turned that sentence over and over in his head and finally found an opening. Leonhardt's sword came crashing down again. The instant Leonhardt slashed, Gray bent low and dodged, then turned his palm and twisted his body in one smooth motion. Leonhardt's expression shifted slightly. He had not expected Gray to handle it like that. Gray kicked Leonhardt in the ankle. Leonhardt's balance broke on the spot, and he was kicked up off the ground. The moment his center of gravity collapsed, Gray counterattacked at once. At that instant, Leonhardt also fully realized it. Gray was treating this classroom duel like an actual fight to the death. But Leonhardt also knew one thing clearly: he could not lose. Gray's sword stopped in front of Leonhardt's throat. At the same time, Leonhardt's sword also stopped in front of Gray's throat. The distance was exactly the same, to the slightest fraction. Any closer, and both of them would have died. Gray reached out, wanting to pull Leonhardt up. This counted as a draw, right? But Leonhardt felt it was not that simple. In that exchange just now, Leonhardt had done only one thing: press forward by brute force with his sword. But Gray was different. If he had truly wanted to win, he could have stabbed straight through Leonhardt's heart. Leonhardt asked in a low voice, "This was only a mock duel, so you forced yourself to point your sword at my neck instead, right?" Gray gave a light laugh. Even with protective spells, pointing a sword at someone's heart in a practice duel is too much. Leonhardt looked as if he had finally let go of something. "Then I lost. Lord Gray, you really are strong." After saying that, he turned and walked away, smiling more sincerely than before. "Thanks to you, I finally understand real combat and practice aren't the same thing. And battle isn't only about swordsmanship." Gray told him not to take it so seriously. "By swordsmanship class standards, what I did just now counts as cheating." Leonhardt looked as if he could not hear that at all. The instructor said to treat it as a real battle. In a real battle, there is no cheating. As he said that, his steps slowly turned back again. "How about another round?" When he spoke, his face was even slightly red. Gray was even more speechless. Again? He had not even recovered his stamina yet. The only reason Gray had won was that Leonhardt had not guarded against that kick. If it had been a frontal clash, he would have had no chance at all. This had already gone beyond skill. Leonhardt's physical ability was simply overwhelming. Just then, a student rushed out and shouted to stop them. "That's enough," he said coldly. "Even if this is practical training, this is still swordsmanship class. No one allowed you to use methods outside of swordsmanship. And besides, what right does trash like you, who only got in through special admission, have to be paired with a top student? Don't get carried away just because you know a bit of magic." Somehow the blame was shoved onto Gray again, as if Gray had arranged the pairing himself. Fortunately, Leonhardt stepped up to speak for Gray. "The professor believes I am the only one qualified to fight Gray. Please stop meddling." The teacher was also drawn over by the argument. "Leonhardt is right. I arranged the pairing. I said I would pair together those of similar strength, didn't I? And in my eyes, Gray is the only one who can contend with Leonhardt." Hearing that, Leonhardt nodded in satisfaction. The teacher really did have good judgment. The teacher saw that the student was unconvinced. "If you don't accept it, then step up yourself. Defeat Gray, and you'll earn the right to challenge Leonhardt." The student became excited instantly. "Exactly what I wanted." He even boasted that he had gotten in by defeating an examiner. "Don't compare me with those who barely passed, or worse, didn't even pass at all." What he did not know was that Leonhardt was sneering inwardly. This person was drawing conclusions about Gray based only on admission category, yet understood nothing about Gray's true strength. It was exactly like his own past self. He was about to suffer for it. Leonhardt even thought it was a good thing. Gray's strength could shut everyone up through this fight. Leonhardt glared at the person ahead of him, looking as though he wanted to tear him apart on the spot. He had finally gotten a chance to be alone with Lord Gray, and this fool had interrupted it. The student felt a chill on his back and looked up in confusion. The moment he looked up, he met Leonhardt's face full of anger. In Leonhardt's heart, he snarled, "For that offense alone, you deserve to die." The student grew even more confused. Wasn't Leonhardt the one most opposed to special admits? So why was he angry at him instead? The teacher asked Gray, "Will you accept the challenge?" Gray did not know the other person's true level, but if he had entered through the regular examination, then this would not be an easy fight. At the very least, Gray could be sure that the other person's endurance and strength were probably both above his own. Even with the brutal training from his master, Gray still could not compare to someone who had had years of systematic nutrition and physical conditioning. Gray was unsure. "If I lose, I won't get expelled, right?" The teacher nodded. "No, this is only practice class, but neither of you should hold back." Gray accepted the challenge, raised his sword, and took his stance. The moment the start signal fell, the nameless student rushed at Gray at great speed. The student shouted arrogantly, "It's time for special admits to learn their place. Figure out what sort of role you are." Their swords clashed on the spot, but Gray immediately sensed something was off. The man's sword was not as heavy as he had expected. Gray pressed down with his wrist, followed through with force, and directly sent the student flying backward. The student froze on the spot. He had not expected Gray to overpower him head-on. Gray remained serious. This guy's strength was not outstanding, so he definitely had some other trump card. Gray suspected the other side was hiding something. Otherwise he could not possibly be this arrogant. But Gray had not expected that one casual strike from him would directly make the other man bleed. The student flew backward and crashed down in an ugly heap. Gray hurried over and asked how he was. I was aiming for your sword just now, but you didn't dodge, so I hit your face instead. I thought you would avoid it. Then Gray saw the student pick up his sword again. Crying, he shouted, "Again! I just wasn't ready before. You won't be this lucky next time." Even the teacher had a headache. If you insist on getting beaten, then keep going until you're satisfied. I'm not stopping it anymore. The second round began, and the student charged at Gray again with his sword. 1 minute later, Gray looked at him awkwardly. "You can still stand, right?" At this point, the student's head was covered in lumps, and his face was swollen. The teacher finally could not bear to watch anymore. "Someone, take him to the infirmary." After the student was carried away, the teacher announced to the whole class, "This year's first-year representatives will be Gray and Leonhardt. Does anyone object?" Gray froze. "Representatives? What did that mean?" The teacher explained, "In a few days, the top first-year students would challenge the second-year champion. This challenge match would be a friendly one, ending before serious harm." The teacher continued, "The first years had already lost 35 times in a row and had never once won. But this year he thought things might be different. You and Leonhardt are both top-tier swordsmanship geniuses. Maybe you can pull one back for us." Gray was stunned. 35 straight losses? Was the gap between first years and second years really that absurd? The teacher nodded. "In this academy, 1 year of difference is a gulf. Losing is normal, even inevitable. As long as you put up a respectable fight, that alone is already remarkable. If you win, that would be a miracle, something written into the academy's history. Being chosen to participate is already an honor." After saying that, the teacher left, telling them not to be nervous and to simply enjoy the duel. Gray rubbed his chin and thought, the teacher seemed so calm. Could it be that the interior battle was not as serious as he had imagined? But for Gray, this was the best possible chance to prove that Divine Eye Special Admits could fight too. He had to train even harder. Meanwhile, the academy professors gathered together for a meeting. The final topic on the agenda was a proposal from Professor Boudra. He proposed expelling the Divine Eye Special Admit Amy White. The speaker was none other than Boudra, a professor from the magic department. Ariel opposed it on the spot. "On what grounds are you making such a proposal? Divine Eye students are under my management," Boudra said coldly. "That is exactly the problem. Amy White failed the third-year advancement exam. Yet because of her special admit status, she was allowed to remain. Everyone else who failed was expelled. Do you think that is fair?" Ariel had no patience to circle around the issue. "I already told you, she is steadily advancing toward world-class combat ability. Right now, her backlash is severe, so she can't use her full strength, otherwise she would have passed long ago. And another thing, my students are for me to decide. It's not your place to interfere." Another professor cut in, his tone mocking. "Severe backlash? A useless student appears out of nowhere, and now you're calling her a hidden genius? Are you still going to keep pushing that story about hidden power?" Ariel's heart sank. The other side had clearly come prepared. It is a fact that Amy is strong, and it is also true that the backlash is real. But she may master that power at any time, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. If we force her now, she may lose that chance forever. But the professors were long tired of hearing this argument. "You said the same thing before. Is your plan really to let someone who doesn't meet academy standards stay here indefinitely?" What Ariel was doing was clearly for the academy. She was trying as hard as she could to preserve true talent. To push them out simply because they did not completely fit the system was a total betrayal of the original purpose. Then another fat professor spoke coldly. "You're lecturing me about talent? The special admits of previous years may have been decent, but this year's batch is a failed product." The old professor smiled even more coldly. "Jacob, Enfield, Amy White, Bella Albright, all very ordinary. The great Divine Eye is going dull. Perhaps it's time to consider abolishing the Divine Eye program." Sweat appeared at Ariel's temple. "You're talking about abolishing it? That's impossible." Someone reminded her, "The program was established by the Academy's founding council." "Yes, but if more than half the faculty agree, it can be abolished the same way. Did you forget?" Another person added the blow. "The Divine Eye students of this generation really aren't that impressive." He had heard that Bella had made some progress, but that could not really be considered an achievement, and on top of that, even her magical capacity was questionable. Ariel had just opened her mouth to speak when she was interrupted again. These people seemed to have conspired beforehand, taking turns belittling the Divine Eye students. Ariel understood very clearly, this was premeditated, and the target was the abolition of Divine Eye special admissions. She also knew that her influence inside the academy had already been reduced to almost nothing. But she also knew that many professors cared only about whether a project benefited the academy, so she could not say anything that might push them completely into the opposing camp. Boudra spoke like a victor. "Why so quiet now? You know you're past your peak too, don't you?" Someone beside him echoed. "You may once have been brilliant, but you'd better retire while your reputation still remains. Don't destroy yourself completely." Ariel could still see true talent, and those children only needed time. If given time, they would definitely prove themselves. All she had to do before then was keep the Divine Eye students from being expelled. As long as she could protect her students, she was willing to pay any price. At that moment, someone suggested, "I heard there's one named Gray who has promise in swordsmanship, then let him fight in the interior battle." Boudreaux revealed a sinister smile. Needless to say, he absolutely must participate. As long as Gray showed himself in swordsmanship, they could use the result to judge the life or death of the Divine Eye program itself. Ariel cast her gaze toward Heathkit nearby. Heathkit only gave a slight shake of the head, signaling, "Gray must not go." Ariel refused on the spot. Gray's power is not suited to simulated combat. In a true fight to the death, he is actually more suitable. One professor slammed the table and glared at Ariel. Another excuse. If that's the case, then abolish the Divine Eye program. Ariel's expression shook. You don't understand. His ability can't be measured by ordinary swordsmanship. The air in the meeting room instantly grew so heavy it was hard to breathe. At that moment, the headmaster spoke, preparing to bring the meeting to a close. Let the Divine Eye student participate in the year battle, and then decide what follows based on the result. Ariel's heart went cold. She had not wanted it to come to this. Boudreaux looked triumphant. I'm starting to look forward to this contest. The meeting is adjourned. Before leaving, Heathkit gave Ariel a long, deep look, his eyes full of suppressed pain. Ariel remained seated alone without moving. She knew Gray's power could not be fully displayed in mock combat. But her position in the academy was too low. She could not stop these people. At this point, she could only hope Gray would produce results in the interior battle. At that moment, Ariel's tears slipped out of control. If Gray failed to produce results, the Divine Eye program might truly be abolished, and then all Divine Eye students would be expelled. She could only place her final hope on Gray.